Thank you. So welcome to our December executive meeting here at the John Meikle Room at Dean House, Taunton. Just to go through the arrangements for the meeting, it's only executive lead members present in the room that are taking decisions at this meeting. Others are in attendance to provide advice, and there's no planned fire drills today. Our alarm, please follow the fire exit signs and congregate in the car park. If anyone present might need assistance to do that, please let one of the Democratic Services team know. The agenda and papers for this meeting have been published on the Council's website in advance of the meeting, and the Council recognises the importance of striking a balance between providing opportunities for the lawful expression of views and any unacceptable behaviours or actions that cause disruption, which can lead to our meetings being adjourned. And the Council will be making a recording of the meeting, and this will be published in due course. So today's meeting is being run using a hybrid format. Executive lead members and key officers are physically present here in the John Meikle Room. Other elected members and officers may be physically present or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific items of the agenda or to observe. Those of you who are online, can I just highlight the following etiquette and guidelines? Please use the meeting chat only for purposes of the meeting, primarily to indicate that you wish to speak, and please only speak at the chair's invitation. Please say your name before speaking, and can I just stress the importance of turning off microphones when not speaking, and cameras too, please, so that we can maintain the bandwidth. We have, just so that members are aware, we are just slightly amending the agenda order. So agenda item 9, which is the budget proposals 25, 26 to 29, 30. We're dropping that down the agenda to number 12, so that we got the papers in a more logical order in order to facilitate. Okay. I see, Henry, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the acting chair of the CNR committee, I have changed the committee changed 2 of the recommendations at the request of Miria Christofi, the 151 officer, to ask for all the budget savings to be brought back to the scrutiny committees so that they can check their own directorates are making the correct savings prior to the meeting on the 29th of January, I think. I didn't want to speak at all the agenda items where we have added this recommendation. I'm just asking, please, that you allow the scrutiny committees to do this validation. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have those 3 recommendations on one of our appendices for the meeting. I think it's Appendix 2. So we will duly note those at each of those points. I think it's on my chair's schedule to do so, but thank you for highlighting those. And if I manage in my LEMSIP adult state to forget, could someone please poke me, and I will do what I can to facilitate those important points coming forwards from scrutiny. Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence this morning? Councillor Oakes, I see, is online in the room.
Yes, I am, Chair. I have a hospital appointment later, so I couldn't be with you this morning.
Okay, that's not a problem, Graham, and good luck with the hospital appointment. And I've had a text from Councillor Keach to give her apologies for meetings today. Okay, if there are no further apologies, can we look at the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of November 24? Are we happy that those are a true and accurate record? That is proposed by Liz Laird-Sean, seconded by, I think Heather Shearer won that by a short head. All those in favour of accepting me signing those minutes, those against, that's clearly carried and duly signed. Do we have any declarations of interest for this morning's meeting? No declarations of interest other than those for city, town and parish councils, which are available for inspection on the website. So we move on to public question time. And our first public question is from Stuart Hearn regarding property disposal. I'm not seeing Mr. Hearn in the room. Is he online? Not online. Okay. If our second question is ready, Sarah, are you ready? We see you just walked in the room. Okay, Sarah, you have 3 minutes. Given we've got two speakers, I might be slightly generous with the 3 minutes if you need it.
Thank you, Chairman, councillors and officers. 10 years ago, we identified that the council was not addressing the schools to be able to hold them to account. But I thank you for acknowledging the 1,100 children who are currently without any provision in Somerset, out of what I estimated to be 2,000 with the HCPs. Each day we are coming across more and more and more children who are being pushed out of schools due to curriculum delivery and reduced staffing in academies. 10 years ago, there was approximately 240 children happily in elected home education. Last year, this number has risen to over 2,200 children at the end of last year, and rapidly growing. The trauma caused in Somerset schools is life-changing for the many who are deregistered from the school systems. We welcome the change of the Somerset Send Reform delivery. This was something that the previous Director of Children's Services changed to prevent the children to receive the funding to stay in mainstream provisions. And Daisy has got something to say.
Dad, when I was at school, because they didn't help me, I now learn at home. Now I like math.
So Daisy is one of 2,500 children in Somerset today who do not have an education. These are families, some of them, not all of them, some of them are natural, home-educated families and children. But almost 2,500 children, their families do not have the monies and the resources to buy the educational resources they need because they have been, as the Children's Commissioner says, some families are being forced to home educate their children. What will the council be doing to ensure that academies are held to account? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So thank you, of course, also to Daisy. First of all, I'll just mention that I went to London last Wednesday and met with the 7 members of Parliament who represent Somerset Council. All 7 of those were absolutely, it was on top of their agenda as to what they get most correspondence about in their inboxes, and we have their support as we try and resolve this situation. I'll call on Councillor Heather Shearer to respond.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you especially to Daisy. It took me a long time for me to like maths, so I'm really pleased that you like it. So thank you so much for coming along, and it's great to see some young people in the chamber. So thank you for that. Super. I'll read out the answer to the question, of course, and you know our doors are always open, Sarah, for conversations. But let me just read out what we'll be sending to you after the meeting. Put the right glasses on so I can see what I'm doing and not squinting. Thank you. So, yeah, we understand and we share the concerns that you have about the increasing number of children without school places and the rise in elective home education, or perhaps home education as you're describing it. Our proposed reforms for SEND and exclusions highlight several key strategies to make mainstream education an appealing and accessible choice for children and their families. With regard to your principal question, the local authority has several measures in place to hold multi-academy trusts and indeed single academy trusts accountable. I'm going to list 5, if I may. So we have team around the school and team around the child meetings. These meetings are conducted across LA maintained schools and academies to ensure that children receive the right support at the right time. These forums are intended to create a level playing field for support and accountability for all establishments. We have a graduated response tool. Now, this is all schools are accountable for ensuring that a graduated response to children, an appropriate response to children with additional needs, is consistently applied. And the use of the graduated response tool by all schools can evidence this. Includes academies, of course. Data sharing. SEND data and other relevant information are shared with multi-academy trust CEO meetings to maintain transparency and accountability. Next one is managing SEND concerns. These are raised at the local authority's school improvement panel, where relationship managers who are linked to academies discuss any special educational need issues during these meetings. This ensures there's joined up work around academies and that we have a full picture of any concerns across schools. And then finally, I'll talk about the locality model. The move towards this model will ensure that all LA schools and academies are involved in phased transition meetings. So there's those very crucial meetings where a child goes from one type of school to another, and facilitating appropriate placements and also the provision for special educational needs and disabilities children. Or those with those particular needs. These steps will help ensure that MATs are providing the necessary support and resources to their students, particularly those with those additional needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. Would also add how the Education for Life strategy has significantly improved our relationship with our school partners in both MAT and particular Academy Trust situations, and we're working a lot more closely with our partners to be able to resolve these issues rather than the culture that had prevailed in days gone by.
I was just going to say thank you for reminding me about that, Chair. I'll make sure we can add that into the written response that we give you.
Indeed, please make sure the written response is addressed to Daisy as well as Sarah. Thank you. So I've just been advised that Stuart will not be able to be in the room to ask his question, and that our Deputy Monitoring Officer, Jill Byram, has the words to read out.
The published vision for Somerset Council is to build a fairer, greener, resilient, more flourishing Somerset that cares for the most vulnerable and listens to you. In 2022, Somerset Council decided it wished to sell Packsaddle Community Fields in Frome to raise capital receipts. The fields are 8 acres of green space and are a listed asset of community value, the only green space asset of community value of its kind in Somerset. Since 2022, I have written to the Council on 5 occasions offering to buy the fields on behalf of the local community, many of whom are elderly and vulnerable, so that the fields can be enjoyed by our community in perpetuity. The first email was sent to estates. The subsequent 4 were sent to senior executives, including Duncan Sharkey and Bill Revens. I have not received a single response to any of these emails. This is not the action of a council that listens to you and cares for the most vulnerable. Whilst refusing to engage with me and the local community, Somerset Council has, however, been actively working with a developer on a scheme to build 74 houses on this green community space. The proposed development scheme is not policy compliant as it does not offer the required 30% affordable housing. It is neither sustainable nor green, as the vast majority of the houses will not have solar panels or heat pumps. They will instead have gas burning boilers. Yet the Council's planning office has still recommended approval. This is not the action of a Greener Council. Please can the executive answer the following questions? 1. Does it accept that these actions are contrary to Somerset Council's published vision, specifically of being a greener Somerset that cares for the most vulnerable and listens to you? 2. What will the executive do to investigate and rectify the situation in order to comply with its published vision?
I'm going to invite Councillor Mike Rigby to respond.
Thank you, Chair. The council is. It's a bit whiny, isn't it? It's even worse. Is that better? Thank you. And well done, Mr. Bryan. The council is committed to the reduction of its property and land portfolio to reduce costs and to achieve capital receipts where there is no alternative operational use identified. The land at Pack Saddle was not required to support the council's statutory operations, in this case being no longer required as a school site. It was therefore considered that the most strategically advantageous use of this site for the council was to dispose of it to support the wider housing needs and to generate a capital receipt, which can in turn be reinvested to deliver other council priorities. By entering into an option agreement, the council is not able to sell the site to any alternative third party. The sale of the site is conditional on the granting of suitable planning consents, and to this end, a planning application has been submitted. Further, the council has an obligation to obtain best value when disposing of its sites. The option agreement generates a higher return than selling the land without planning permission and reduces the risk to the council. In securing the highest value for the site, the council can use the receipts to invest into its ongoing work in supporting other services, including providing care for its most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. And move on to item 5, which is the executive forward plan. Are there any comments on the executive forward plan? Not seeing anything from lead members or associate lead members. Any other members? Not seeing any, so that is duly noted. And so we move on to item 6, which is the Somerset Council Improvement and Transformation Programme and our December update. And I'll invite Councillor Theo Butt-Philip to introduce the item, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, just to introduce the regular update, which dates for 12th October to the 8th of November and covers the work of the Improvement Transformation Programme, not least, of course, the Workforce Transformation Programme, in which we are still in the middle of the consultation process, but it also covers other key areas, including innovation and devolution. I'll hand over to Sarah Cretney to take us through the report.
Thank you. So the report in front of you provides a progress update, as Councillor Butt-Philip said, from the month from 12th of October to the 8th of November. The programme continues to make significant progress across the various work streams. However, our current primary focus, of course, is on the workforce programme and the whole council restructure. Updates on the programme are contained within the main body of the report, and the latest risk report is contained within Appendix A. A summary of the changes to risk since the last update in October is detailed on page 24. Following feedback from scrutiny in October, all risks are now being reviewed and updated on a monthly basis, regardless of the risk score. And the risk report now includes more narrative against the mitigating actions and the overall risk updated by the risk owner. Following further feedback from scrutiny this month, it's actually last month, we will be looking at the time deadlines for each of the actions within those risks. There are no new risks to report during this reporting period, and no risks have been closed. That's all in terms of a brief update. Over to you for questions.
Do we have any questions from lead members or associate lead members, first of all? No, not seeing any questions. So can I go to other members? And Councillor Faye Purbrick. Good morning, Faye.
Morning, Chair. Thank you. Can I first say thank you to officers for the changes that have been made in this report? It's really much clearer than it was last month what's going on, and I appreciate those updates. It makes it much easier to keep a track. There's just one point of clarification, if I may, and then I have a few questions. There's a sentence on page 4 of the report, which I think is page 24 of our documents, that talks about the risk score has no change due to uncertainty unassociated with staff feedback. It's under, can't see it now, sorry. Under item 10, ITP 10. What does that mean? The associated uncertainty? Have we not got the feedback? Is there something missing? Just some clarity on that one first, please, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the apologies for the slightly confusing wording. This effectively refers to we will not be reviewing this risk until the consultation is closed, hence the uncertainty. So the uncertainty is the fact that we are still in consultation and were still in consultation when this report was written. At the end of that process, we'll be able to clarify any residual risk and any particular issues once that's completed.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to be sure on that one because I tried it many ways around. I wasn't quite sure. So my next question is actually around the following page, page 25. Yeah, page 25, that says that no new or retired risks have happened during the report. I note that the budget happened during the period that this report covers, because we're looking up until the 13th of November, and a lot of associated cost pressures that may affect the council and council suppliers were made clear within that budget. One of those may be additional EHCP assessments that are needed with young people coming out of our public school sector. We'll also see additional pressures in national insurance costs and potential additional need from our adult social care sector. I know that the local government is protected from the national insurance increases, but presumably some of our suppliers may be at risk of handback if they're in trouble because of the costs that they have within their contracts. And also the pressures on the third sector, who are delivering a lot of our services, who won't be protected from those national insurance pressures, on top of the fact that we've already heard, including from our deputy leader, about those who may not be now contributing their winter fuel allowance to charity. Have we assessed the risk to our charity's income and how that might potentially affect the services that we can deliver, and whether the transformation, in particular workforce transformation programme, is actually robust in that? I think it's concerning that there isn't a risk looking at those. And then if do you want me to stop there and go to the appendixes later, Chair?
I think it's possibly easier but from the length of the questions, just to take one at a time, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Berwick. Alan.
Thank you, Chair. It's a critical question in terms of the impact that the budget would have. Before we can, because of the reporting cycle and because of the nature of when this report was put together, we are unclear as to what impact that will have. Once we have the budget settlement from government, we'll be able to carry out that assessment and consider whether there's any further requirements of the programme overall as a result of the budget settlement, but only at that point we'll be able to advise members. It's an excellent point though, is there a risk associated with the budget, and that's something that we can reflect on as part of our risk review for this month and then report that into scrutiny executive moving forward. But undoubtedly the changes do need to be assessed to consider that, so I think the question is spot on in terms of its scope. In terms of the overall impact, we of course have our memorandum of understanding with the BCSFE, so to do with dealing with the third sector. We are reflecting and reviewing on the progress associated with the rollout of that memorandum of understanding and then working with the third sector. They too are unpacking the implications associated with the budget, and only when we see the financial settlement from government will we then have a true picture of what those implications are going to be. So it's new news to them too, so we'll have those conversations as part of our working arrangements. The final piece is, of course, if there are changes to how the providers are working and what the implications are for national insurance, we'll need to take account of that as part of our overall budget settlement and consider that through the pressures. The programme itself will largely remain set because of the parameters and what we can physically achieve through workforce reductions and other elements. However, it will influence the future programmes for transformation by giving us a target as to what financial savings we need to make of any future transformation. But we've been very clear about this transformation programme primarily focused on workforce at this stage. So I guess in summary, the principle is we will need to review all of those different changes as part of our future risk reporting and then consider that as part of our updates into executive into January, February and March next year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, next question.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify on that, so there will be a risk before we get the settlement, but there wasn't time to do it before the 13th of November when this report period covered. Cool, thank you. So my next question, Chair, is around the Appendix A and the risk register. And I note that there's been some good progress made, so well done to everybody involved in that, because I know that that will not have been an easy task. But also seeing a lot of the end dates for this being the 31st of March, which is obviously the end of the financial year as well. Are we really not expecting some of this stuff to be done until the end of the financial year? Or is that the kind of drop dead date when, if it hasn't been done by, those risks will come to fruition? And also on ITP 13, 14, 16 and 17, which all relate to devolution. We know from speaking to our parishes, they're setting their presets now, they're putting their budgets together, and a lot of those devolution risks are in the final quarter of the year. Are we clear that our parishes will still be able to actually take on any of that devolution moving past the end of the year when many of them decide their presets and set their budgets? And if we don't, what are the risks to the services and the provision to members of the public if they are unable to take that on at this point in time? I know at the drop dead point last year, we saw some final savings coming in from some of our town councils on some major projects. I'm thinking of the sports park in Yeovil. But are we expecting to see that on a much wider level on smaller scale projects across all of our parishes, or will those services just cease if those risks aren't addressed in time? Thank you, Chair.
I think Mr. Chris Hall is indicating.
Thank you. I'll take the devolution question if I may. So just to be absolutely clear, we're not forcing any services or towns and parish councils. So those services that are likely to be devolved, we're already having that two-way conversation with them now. So there are a handful that are in progress, likely to be delivered for the 1st of April, and then there's another wave that come along in June. They're all subject to the democratic process of the individual town and parish, so they have the choice. They are setting their precepts in anticipation of those negotiations. So we're not saying to any towns or parishes right now, we will not provide this service unless you take it. We are having negotiated conversations, mainly around the services and assets that they are seeking from us. So there's been numerous letters from the leader over the past 2 years. Numerous town councils have come forward, and we have a pipeline of activity. So we're aware of what most town, city or parish councils would like to transfer, and we are working our way through them. At the moment, they are on the basis of financial priority. So we're packaging things together to make sure those city, towns or parishes have assets and services that deliver the greatest impact for Somerset Council.
So, Gretel Liz Lichen for the risk register question.
Thank you, Chair. I do understand the concern about due date and what due date means. It is, of course, the latest date at which it's due, and I find it very helpful actually to have the column of the latest notes. I find it needs reading. It's no good just looking at the progress bar. It actually needs reading right across for every one of the risks. But completely take your point that a due date sounds as if that's the date it must land. It is the latest date it must land. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. That's one of the reasons I asked for those additional bits to be on the risk register. So as I said before, very grateful for those. I think my final question, Chair, is around the risk of the capitalisation directive for the redundancy payments. We still don't appear to have a decision on that. We keep hearing updates that it's coming. I suppose the question is, do we know when we're expecting that? And what is the contingency if the answer when it finally does come down the track is no.
Through you, Chair. So we're still waiting for the outcome, but the advice that's been received from MHCLG is once you're in the process, behave as if you're going to be receiving it. So we've gone through each stage so far. We're just waiting for the outcome of their review. If they didn't provide us with the capitalisation directive, then I think it's really clear where we would be. That's why we applied for the capitalisation directive in the first place. So I would hope that government would be working with us to ensure that we did receive that, and we actually applied for the 76 million. So we're waiting for all of that to come through to us.
A few questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rodriguez. Good morning, Diego.
Hello. Oh yeah, that works. Just quickly following up on the devolution point. I only wonder how kind of robust are these asset devolution agreements with towns and parish councils? Reason asking, for personal experience on Bridgwater Town Council, one of the things that town councils are being told now through their budget setting is that they're having to increase the budget for parks, open spaces, street cleaning, which was taken on from Somerset Council. And the reason we're being told that is that the figure they were given by Somerset Council to deliver that was not quite accurate, which is clearly an impact on budgets locally. So I'm just wondering how robust are those kind of agreements being made?
Chris Hall to answer.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the agreement, they're robust. What we have had is conversation with city, towns and parishes on the basis of our current costs. And we've been quite clear and transparent with those involved that our current costs are not necessarily the same costs for a city, town or parish. So depending on the mechanism of delivery of their parks and open spaces will depend upon how many staff they employ, how many vehicles they operate, how many grass cuts they do a year, how much maintenance they choose to do on their play areas. So we've provided all the information we can based upon our expenditure and our budgets. What we're not able to do is confirm what it will cost a city, town or parish if they deviate from that schedule or they choose to pay different rates.
Okay. Any other comments from online? Not seeing anybody else. Can I just echo the thoughts from Councillor Purbrick of the improved layout of the report? I really did find that easier to follow as a result. So thank you so much for that. So our recommendations from the report are to note the progress made in the last month and to note the current assessment of the programme risks, which include those of a score of 16 or higher, which may arise during the change process, along with the status of actions to mitigate these risks as detailed in Appendix A. That's proposed by Councillor Butt-Philip, seconded by Councillor Wilkins, and those in favour, please, and those against. That is clearly carried. Which brings us on to item 7, which is the General Fund Revenue Capital Budget Monitoring Report for 24-25, month 6, and invite Councillor Liz Lashon to introduce, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So Q2, so this is to the end of September, where things in the world of local authority budgets are moving so fast these days. The end of September seems quite a long time ago now, but it is an important point in the year, the halfway point. So our revenue and capital are now in a combined paper for budget monitoring. And we know that capital certainly impacts on revenue, particularly with the cost of borrowing being included in the revenue budget. Table 1 on page 60 now gives separation between the one-off pressures and the ongoing pressures, helping us with understanding both of the current year, but also for financial year ahead and where we will be going on budget setting next February. And this particularly applies to children's services, where placement numbers and costs continue to be a very significant concern to us. This year, of course, includes the one-off monies from capitalisation direction and use of reserves, so use of earmarked reserves for MTFP. Please think of that reserve line as a balancing figure in this table. Although we're showing it as an underspend at this stage in the year due to services combined underspend and lack of need for the corporate contingency, this is not a true underspend due to those one-off monies in our budget. The dedicated schools grant deficit, known as the DSG deficit, is becoming more and more of a concern. And I really welcome, although it's a huge number of appendices, they are extremely helpful to us in having all of these things that are so important to us divided into individual appendices. This is becoming more and more of a concern, and the even higher figures that we hear from other comparator councils give us no comfort, and the £1 billion allocated by government for SEND frankly will not touch the sides for councils that are carrying the biggest impact of increased spend on the high needs block. Our capital programme is showing significant slippage. The recommendations in this paper including capital slippage of over 75 million into future years. But the capital programme covers a number of years, not one single year. So again, the appendices are very detailed and therefore welcome to members, particularly on capital, where we all like to see projects in our divisions both funded and completed. So at this point, Chair, if I may, I would like to hand over to Nicola Hicks for further detail on the paper and its appendices. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola Hicks.
Sorry, Chair, we can't hear it coming out of there, so I'm not sure if it's online.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll just start again. Sorry, break the microphone. So bullet point 3 on page 55 speaks about the position the council is in forecasting to be on budget. That's because although the services are showing a forecast underspend, what we're actually doing is reducing that call on reserves, which we use to set the budget for this financial year. So we're very clear there in the text there about it being a balanced position with the reduction on reserves with the drawdown of 8.479 million at this present time. Moving into bullet point 4, this highlights the positive movements that are listed in table 1. Every directorate in there is reporting a positive movement of some value, together then with some negative movements at the bottom of the page, mainly the largest one there being for children and families, which, as we know, relates to external placements, which we've spoken about at this committee before. If we just move down through the report, large series of recommendations there where we've tried to, in bold, highlight where it refers to a section of the report and a value or an appendix for officers and members to note. If we just move down to page 60 at the bottom of table 1, you can see there we've expanded the paragraph there that talks about the use of our earmarked reserves and the exceptional financial support in terms of the capitalisation directive, and we've tried to drag the text at the bottom of that table to make it really clear for the reader of the report, just based on previous comments received. If we go down through the report, we've added section 13, which is regarding the dedicated schools grant, which is what Councillor Lation just spoke about. We've added that to the main sum of the report now to highlight the importance of that and the risk that it poses to the council. And this is more detailed in Appendix C, which is very clear about the risks with the DSG. If we go down through, section 15 talks about the MTFP savings monitoring, and the table on page 63 at the top shows that on track is 52% with 34% achieved. However, this is quite alarming at this stage. It's still only 34% showing as achieved there. We actually need that to be significantly higher. Those, as you will recall, the budget was set with those savings having been delivered. We really do need those at this stage of the financial year to go into that achieved column. So the finance team are working with services to try and bring that forward. As you know, we've spoken before that those unachievable savings, we would be looking for services to come up with an alternative saving that could be put before members to be agreed, in order to not carry that position forward into the budget. But if that is unachievable, that will go into increase the gap on next year's budget, which you'll see in our budget paper. As this is a quarterly report, there are a number of additional information and appendices to the report regarding spend control board, treasury management, collection fund rates, which aren't in our monthly reporting. I think it's important to note there on the collection fund rates on bullet point 23 that actually we're slightly up in our targets there in terms of our collection rate. So that's actually a positive as well for Q2. If we then, the report goes into, as it's now a combined report, we go into the capital programme. You will see at the table 3 on page 66 there shows the original budget for capital and the revised budget for Q1, which we'd already revised down to 195 million. A further revision with further slippage has been identified now to take the total spend projected to be 119 million for the year, with it going into future years. I think with capital, we've included some new appendices in the report. So hopefully you will have seen that Appendix O now shows a new way of monitoring all of the schemes. It details each of the schemes in the directorates, the slippage, the forecast outturn, any changes in budget. Following some comments that were made when we took this report to scrutiny, more information was required with regards to slippage and more details in terms of some of the projects that make up the lines in that appendix, and we will endeavour to do that as we bring the reports forward. I think they were keen to know about the reasons for slippage and actually were there any common themes and the knock-on effect that slippage has. So if schemes are moved into future years, does that mean that actually the scheme is going to end up costing the council more? Because as we know, construction costs get higher if there is that slippage. And then does it have any effect on our income that we've got, such as external grants to deliver those schemes? I think the other appendix is Appendix P, which shows the funding against each of the schemes for the whole of the programme and how it's funded. I think that's important to note. Actually, of our whole capital programme, only 17.9% of it is us borrowing for that capital programme. The rest of it is grants and contribution and external funding. So I think that's important to note. But happy to take any questions.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Anything more to add? No. So looking for comments and questions. Councillor Sarah Wakefield.
Yes, I just wanted to congratulate the officers on the efforts they've made to make this very readable, and also the detail that's in this report is really helpful. I'm really pleased to see that things are mostly going in the right direction, although, as you have made very clear, Nicola, any savings we do make just go into reducing the use of capital, reducing our reserves, which of course we want to keep hold of as much as possible. I did just want to refer anybody who's interested to the Adult Services report and explanations on page 74, because it looks like we're saving a lot of money and we're certainly working hard to do that, but there are reasons for that, and they are set out on those pages about in our commissioning success in stabilising the market using less agency workers, which are very expensive, and on the international recruitment side, which really helps us because we can get people working for us at the rates that we want to pay. And in the learning disability budget, we're working on a new model which was helped by the Newton project, and this is a reduction in support because we're using more mentors like bus buddies and people to develop people's skills so that they then can become more independent. That is, of course, what all of us want to see happening. So I'm really pleased to say that. On the overspend in commissioning, this is to do with intermediate care and our bedded pathways. We are closing or getting some closing pathway 2 beds to be closed because they are very expensive. And these are the ones where people come out of hospital, they go to another bedded situation, but without so much of the support that they need to become independent. And those are not so much useful to us. We want to either get people back home or get them into some care and support at home or into a place where they will get that help to become independent. So that's what's happening there. And the overspend in the commissioning, it is also shown, is because this is part of a pooled budget with the ICB, and we have to show a sort of balancing figure. I think my colleague Mel will be able to explain this better than me if anybody wants to know, but it's a kind of movement of figures situation rather than a massive overspend. I don't think that's made that more complicated, but anyway.
Thank you, Sarah. And Heather.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to, I don't want to keep repeating what people have said. I think it's really important. There's a few things I wanted to mention. Of course, I'm indebted to the work the officers are putting in collaboratively across across children's and finance and other teams. Oh, is it not working? How does that sound? Any better? I'll project. No? No, is it? How does that one sound? Any better? Oh, it worked earlier on. That's really weird. Okay. Off? Yeah. How does that one sound? Better? Okay. Third time lucky. They can hear online. Oh, that's grand, as long as they can. Okay, no problem. I just wanted to say a couple of things around the just to commend the officers around the work that's been going on across the department. And Appendix B has an awful lot of information in there around the work that we are doing and that kind of laser-like sort of focus that we've been having on both what things are costing and also modelling into the future, which is why the forecasts are perhaps a little bit more realistic perhaps now than they have been in the past. So I think that's really good to see. I also wanted to say that we have been working, of course, as you'd expect, on the placements are the biggest issue that we have. And of course, that is made worse by the fact we don't have enough foster carers. So we are working on increasing our foster carers, but also building our relationships with our independent foster care agencies. But realistically, we have to understand and accept, which this report is doing, the number of children who may be coming into placements and work as much as we can to make those placements the best ones for them, the best price. I also just want to say, and I know we've said it 3 times, so I feel a bit bad about this, but actually being able to have that Appendix C with looking at the dedicated schools grant and the high needs block is really important because the comprehension of that to understand why it's in that position. And a lot of these things are, I was just on a schools board earlier in the week, last week rather, and they were, a lot of our national funding formulas are not helpful for us in all kinds of ways, but we do have a good relationship and an improving relationship with our schools so that we understand where they are and they know that we're helping them and supporting them to make the best of the money that we have, which is finite. So I just wanted to, I really am pleased that the reports are getting clearer, I think, and there's a lot of information in there for you. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Just looking around for any other league members or associates who wish to contribute. No, so I'll go to Diego.
Thank you, Chairman. So on this one, just a couple of points from me. Looking at the outstanding debt firstly on page 64, paragraph 24. Just noting it does say end quarter 2 total debt stands at 34.18 million. I only wonder how much of this debt is council realistically expecting to collect, because I'm sure the finance officer would agree, kind of if you could collect all of it, that would make our world a better place. So just trying to understand it realistically, how much of that's coming back.
I think it's important for us to be collecting anything that's owed to the council. Some of this in terms of age profile will be different and type of debt that we're collecting. So the approach is slightly different. However, the officers will be endeavouring to collect everything that's owed to us, even from past financial years, until we collect it all There would only be, if we couldn't collect for whatever reason, for example, if a business was no longer established that could pay the money that they owed us, for example, then we'd be looking at write-offs, but we don't write off debt that is collectible, only that is no longer collectible. And if there are any write-offs, we'd be reporting back to the executive in the usual way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The second one for me then is on the capital programme. At this point last year, and I apologise to the finance officer because I may have made these comments at corporate resources scrutiny. At this point last year, £85 million of that capital programme was slipped into future years against the budget set of 316 million. And just noting this year, over half of the budgeted capital programme is undeliverable this year. Obviously, that's a negative trend, and I wonder if there are particular pressures this year that weren't there last year. And I find it hard to kind of track some of these. I don't know what specific projects are affected. I know there is some detail, but perhaps not enough. For example, the bridge structures, road structures, active travel, it's about £10 million being slipped. I don't know what particular projects or why, and I'm unable to track whether any of those were slipped from last year and being slipped again. I'm not saying they are, but I'm unable to track that. And I'm concerned as well with all the with the large kind of slippage, what the effect on delivery of some of these projects are going to be. I know that with some of these projects there'll be time constraints, particularly when they're linked to outside government grants, and there's going to be an inevitable increase in cost to many of these projects due to inflation. We know that £1 million today isn't £1 million tomorrow, and we've seen the effect of that on programmes as mentioned in the report, such as the Staple Growth Housing Infrastructure Fund, and we also know, for example, Bridgewater Town Deal not being able to deliver what was envisaged in the outset, partly because of it being delayed. So I've got concern around that and being able to track lots of these projects and the general negative trend.
Liz Percival.
Thank you, Chair. I do understand, having been close to the Glastonbury Town Deal projects, all of them. This is a really basic comment. Forgive me for a basic comment, colleagues. I would much rather a project slipped and was delivered within budget than that project came forward early with an unrealistic budget that was then subject to endless contract instructions that then took it over the funded amount. So whilst I regret slippage on capital programme the same as anyone else, for me, over the last few years, when construction costs rose by such a huge percentage, I feel that slippage has been inevitable, and that projects have slipped from one year to another and possibly to another, but that our capital programme is over a number of years, and actually controlling the budget on each of those projects has been, for me, really good work and incredibly important work, and that will continue. Thank you, Chair.
Through you, Chair. Yes, you're testing whether I've got my numbers right. So at Q2, 85.653 million was slipped in the last financial year, and at outturn 196.890 million was slipped. Within the reports, I don't have the detail to tell you which ones slipped that are consistent with what's slipping at the moment, but members and the public can track that in the public domain. We have that all there. I think it's important, and I've said this before, both at scrutiny and at executive before, it's important to treat the capital programme as a multi-year programme, not an annual budget. And I suspect that in prior financial years, there's been some hesitancy about reprofiling the budget in the appropriate years and being a bit ambitious with the budget in the earlier years, as opposed to the actual delivery plan that's linked to the programme in terms of the project and how it will deliver. It's important for us that when we're slipping the capital programme, that we slip it into the right financial years, and I will be reviewing all of the capital programme before we bring it back to the executive and full council as part of the budget papers. So I would expect to see that capital programmes are phased over the years, in the latter years, with the appropriate budgets, so we don't have so much slippage happening in this way.
Thank you. Chilcott. Good morning, Mandy.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me the question. Just following up on this slippage, because I think these are tens of millions of pounds each time we're talking about. My concern is we understand the multi-year projects, but when costing that project, if we look at the increase in cost of employment, increase in cost of materials in particular, my concern is that a project in year one actually might be a lot more expensive if you keep slipping it forward as all those costs go up. So are each of these projects being recosted as a slip forward, because that will inevitably put the cost up? That's my first question.
I think it's important to recognise that when we're procuring, when there are procurements for capital programmes, actually the prices can be locked in from the beginning of the contract, and it depends on the contract that's associated with any capital programme delivery. There is also something about the recognition, as the Service Director for Finance and Procurement has said, we do recognise if they're not locked in, there could be an increase in cost, there could be a decrease in cost, depending on what's happening in the market and where we're looking to procure at the right time. Of course, we will endeavour as officers to get the best value and the best price associated with how we're delivering capital programmes. But I can't speak for the capital programming, how it was profiled previously, but we are working on that as officers, and you have my commitment that when we bring the papers back in February, that the capital programmes will be reprofiled accordingly.
Thank you. I think it'd be a struggle for any builder, for example, to tie in prices too far forward at the moment because of the volatility of materials in the market, but I'll leave that. My second question is actually around the agreed savings proposals. So as we've heard already, we've got some that are achieved, 34%, some on track and some at risk. We're now 6 months into the year, so I am not seeing anything there at all within the report really that details if it's at risk and likely to be unachievable, what's going to be put in its place. And I asked this question because we had exactly the same last year, and I didn't see anything come forward to replace what was not going to be achieved. And I think, you know, as an authority, delivering savings is something certainly that the auditors watch and are very keen on. So I'm just wondering, are we likely, and at what point are we likely to know what's at risk, and if it's not going to be delivered, what's going to be put in its place? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I share concerns that, as the Service Director for Finance and Procurement has already said, our expectation is, as a council, that savings are already delivered before the financial year starts, and that we're not tracking them throughout the year. This is not unusual given the financial times that local government has seen, and we've seen this up and down the country where savings are being delivered during the year and not necessarily just before the financial year. I would expect that any saving that is in the unachievable section, that we would see a substitute saving, and we are working with service directors across the organisation to ensure that they're coming forward. There's a report on the latter part of this agenda where you will see a substitute saving, and any savings that are substituted will be substituted publicly for members and the public to see, and for a decision to be taken that one saving is no longer achievable, and then there is another one that comes on board in order to fill that gap. All our budget in the year is predicated on all of these savings being achieved to time, value and profile, but also any savings in the MTFP, medium-term financial plan and strategy, are delivered for the future years as well. So it's imperative that these are delivered. We expect services to be identifying the actions that they need to take, and we will report back to you on a monthly basis as to where we see. There should be nothing that moves into achieve that is not cash banked and delivered. If the savings initiative is delivered but the cash is not released, then it won't be marked in the achieve section.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other hands. No, so we'll move to the recommendations. Fantastic, it's a whole side of A4. Okay, so the recommendations are that the executive note council is now forecasting a balanced revenue position, i.e. on budget. Notes the total revenue forecast underspend of 8.479 million for the year, and there was a forecast underspend of 2.419 million within service directors 24-25 and a corporate contingency of 6 million. Whilst remains unallocated, it has been released into the forecast outturn within budget lines table 1. C, note the planned use of reserves of 36.8 million for the medium-term financial plan. Support towards the budget is forecast to reduce by 8.479 million to 28.321 million due to the forecast underspend within budget lines. Agreeing that mitigating actions are to be identified in order to reduce any overspends, to take action and to contribute to the long-term financial sustainability of the authority, and agrees that the council continues with the aim of avoiding a section 114 notice by taking all of the necessary actions and continuing to operate as if one had been delivered, and note the progress and of delivered savings of 13.114 million of the approved savings programme in table 2 and appendix J, and notes that work will continue to find mitigating or substitute savings for the 0.432 million of red unachievable savings, deliver the 5.142 million amber at risk savings and the 20.189 green on track savings. H, note the in-year forecast to overspend on the dedicated schools grant of 28.259 million, an increase of 2.419 million from month 5 in paragraph 14. Note that the total forecast DSG year-end deficit of 64.199 million as set out in appendix C. Note the collections rate for council tax and business rates set out in paragraph 24. Note the quarterly update on the prudential indicators indicated in appendix L. Note the outstanding debt position as detailed in chart 3, appendix M. Note the level of general reserves is 52.4 million, risk-based assessment minimum 30, maximum 60. Approves the additional quarter 2 capital slippage of 75.690 million in future years. Approves the 22.123 million of externally funded additions to the capital programme as detailed in the section 34 of this report, and notes 2.708 million of environments within the capital programme as shown in appendix O. There will be a quiz later. Can I see can I see those a proposer? That's Councillor Liz Leish on a second, Councillor Sarah Wakefield. All those in favour, please. All those against, that's clearly carried. So we move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the 24-25 housing revenue account, revenue and capital budget monitoring report for quarter 2. And I'd like to invite Councillor Federica Smith-Roberts to introduce the item.
Thank you, Bill. I'm happy to introduce this item to the committee today. You will see that we have had a positive movement in relation to our overspend, with that decreasing. There is still an overspend, but there has been a saving there of just over 642,000. Due to the fact that we've been able to increase the forecast of the recovery of our income that's coming in. We are still seeing an overspend in repairs and maintenance, and the way that our voids, how long they're being left for and the condition that they are being left in. So we have got a project ongoing to both reduce the time that it takes to turn over our properties, alongside working on a procurement exercise to maybe use external contractors, which you'll hear more about in coming weeks. I see this as a positive step when looking at the way that we've handled the budget up until now. However, we have still got a lot of work to do, but this is the position that we're in as of now, alongside both in the capital having some slippage there in the projects that we're doing. We're open to any questions.
Looking for any questions and comments. Councillor Wakefield.
Yes, thank you for this, and I'm pleased to see the movement in the right direction. That's really good to see, and it must be very difficult to keep control of it all. I wanted to ask 2 things. I wasn't sure whether this was a Somerset Western Taunton and Almo report, or whether it was just one or the other. I wasn't sure about that. With the voids and handback issues and the state of the properties at that time, is there anything we can do to make sure that this doesn't continue? Because we have got 3 in my division that have been handed back or come back in hand in a really poor state. And I'm a bit surprised that they could actually be allowed to get in that state, because I don't know what our tenancy agreements say, but normally a landlord does have a right to check on the state of repair of a property, to enter and check on the state of repair. And I would have thought that if it's, as it's council owned, the right to go in and actually do the work, even if the person doesn't actually want it, if the property doesn't meet the decent homes and other standards that it should meet. So I just wanted a bit more information about that. I'm looking at paragraph 20 on page 163, which talks about the Leaving Well scheme, and I'm very pleased to see that's a really good idea, to try and get people to understand, presumably, what sort of state their properties should be in, and when they decide to leave, what sort of condition they should be handed back in. But it's just a distraction, really, because I know somebody, excuse me, in my village who lives in a council house. It's in a beautiful state. It's got a new kitchen, new bathroom. It's got solar panels on the roof, and it's really beautifully kept. Now, she's lived there all her life, and her family did before her. But, just the fact that she lived there all her life doesn't mean that she's allowed to not let anybody in to check out what it's like. So I just wondered if there was any more update on that. Thank you.
So just in answer to your questions, Sarah, in relation to this report, it's a combined HRA report, so it shows both the in-house service and Homes in Sedgemoor under the one umbrella, and obviously reporting on both of them. When it comes to actually access to properties, to the best of my knowledge, and Chris can come in and correct me, is that the fact that we don't have a right of access. People can look to leave, they can decide that they don't want the new bathroom upgraded. They can decide that they don't want the kitchen upgraded. That's up to them to decide. We want to work with tenants, because obviously when we do want to put kitchens and bathrooms in, we're wanting to modernise the properties, but that's up to those tenants to do it. We can do external surveying to look at the properties, but they have the ability to, not have access. We do try and get in, and you will see that through the corporate performance report around needing to go in to do some of the electrical safety checks, but it doesn't mean that we're there doing inspections because it's their home. I don't know, Chris, if you want to come in any further.
Yeah, so the ability for us to inspect and upgrade properties is written into the tenancy agreements. However, the tenant doesn't actually have to let you in. So we can give notice, we can write to them, we can call them, we can text them, we can arrange times, but they are under no legal obligation at that stage to let you through the front door. So the tricky bit we have is that we have a desire to maintain the properties to a high standard, and there are some tenants who don't want you in their property for a variety of reasons. For electrical and for gas safety checks, we can go to the courts and we can seek an injunction, which is our current legal route to get access to our properties. So if someone refuses us access to undertake an annual gas safety inspection, we will go to the court, we'll get an injunction, and the courts will always support that because it's a legal safety measure. They are not, I suspect, going to support us to fit a new kitchen or a new bathroom. Now, I haven't tested that principle, but it doesn't seem proportionate or a good use of the court's time, whereas our legal duties for gas and electrical, we're always well supported by the courts.
Well, I would have thought you'd only got to do a few cases and make it known in the marketplace that you are going to go in and check the decent homes and all the rest of it, and they're up to standard, to get that understood by your tenants. I mean, I'm really surprised that you say there's no right in the lease to inspect and repair, because I've never come across a lease of property that didn't have that right in it. And if that's a statutory thing, then I understand it. But, yes, it is their home, but as landlord, you usually have the right to go and inspect and carry out necessary repairs.
Chris, to clarify.
Yeah, there is written into the lease the right of access. That is not the same as a tenant letting you over the threshold. They can refuse. They have a quiet enjoyment in their lease as well. So whilst it's written in there, I cannot go to a property and demand access without an injunction from the court.
Okay, any further questions or comments from associates or lead members? No, so broaden that out. Councillor Rodriguez.
Thanks, Chair. Again, apologies for repeating comments made at Corporate Resources. Page 163 on the write-offs during 24-25. noting Homes in Sedgemoor's figure of 13k and the in-house of 131k. I only wondered if there's any background as to why there is that kind of notable difference there, and is there something that the HIS model is doing differently to the in-house service, please? That's my first question.
Harry, you best place to pick that one up.
Yes, Chair, I can answer that question. I'll answer part of. So the difference between Homes in Sedgemoor and the in-house service, was reviewed during Q1 to look at kind of age debt that was on the account on the ledger, and to review that systematically to kind of say whether or not that we had been able to exhaust all routes of inquiry to try and recover that debt. It was determined that those routes had become exhausted, and therefore there was a decision to make the write-off. In terms of the kind of difference in activities, I would have to come back to answer that question, Chair.
Okay, we'll come back with that one.
Thank you, Chair. And the second question then is really around the slippage of the 37.7 million. Similar comments to previously of the capital programme, really just concern around that and the effect on being able to deliver the projects. Again, what costs £1 million today doesn't necessarily cost £1 million tomorrow. I just wondered if there's any more detail on the reason for slippage. And looking at Appendix A, I think it was, I did just, one thing that stood out for me was the slippage on the fire safety programme. That's about, well, worked out about 70% of the fire safety programme budget being slipped into future years. Initially, on face value, that's quite concerning, but I'm hoping you'll give us some reason to not be so concerned.
Thank you, Chair. And we will get you a full written answer just so that we can go into detail and get you the information, especially on the fire safety element. I do believe that we have got contracts with set charges in on our capital programmes, but we'll get a written answer for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diogo. Any other questions? Mandy?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. And I've noted the scrutiny comments. There's a lot of mention of gas, electricity, water, asbestos, etc. Just some reassurance, really. We've heard there are plans to speed up removal of unsafe cladding. Couldn't see any reference to it in the paper, so just making sure we don't have any buildings with that for reassurance for the public. Thank you.
If you're relating, Mandy, to the Grenville report and everything that's come from that, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't got any unsafe cladding on our properties. We've only got the one high rise that's currently affected, that's the height, which is Westfield House, but to the best of my knowledge, that cladding, and it's not cladded.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear. I just think we don't see it in our reports, so it's good that everybody knows that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not seeing anybody else. So we have 4 recommendations, which are to note the HRA forecast overspend of 1.717 million for 24-25, the mitigating actions in the report and the impact on the HRA general fund reserve of this overspend, to agree to take further mitigating actions to pull back the forecast overspend in the next quarter and by outturn. Note the forecast outturn position in the capital programme of 55.172 million for 24-25, and to approve slippage of 37.723 million into future years. And note the capital environment in paragraph 27. And just note the comments from Councillor Hobhouse about future monitoring of the budget by that scrutiny committee. Can I see a proposer for those? Councillor Frederick Smith-Roberts, seconded by Councillor. Can I see those lead members in favour, please? Those against? That's clearly carried. As I indicated earlier, we'll take item number 9 more logically after 10 and 11. So we move on to agenda item 10, which is our corporate performance management report, quarter 2, and invite Councillor Liz Lishon to introduce.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this second quarterly report again uses our council's 4 priorities as the headings for performance indicators, plus our overarching priority of an effective, efficient and sustainable council. The Performance Risk and Budget Board met last week and has agreed to look at local indicators as well as national indicators, so that in the future we see more meaningful indicators that will be fully recognisable to members, officers, residents and businesses. So no one in this room would expect to see green on all the planning indicators at this time. We'll also be approaching the chairs, the vice chairs and members of each of the scrutiny committees, asking for their engagement in an exercise to establish which indicators, both national and local, would best give them the performance reporting they need to be assured of the Council's achievements against its priorities. I hope very much that scrutiny members and lead members and associates will engage fully in this work. It is not intended for formal committee meetings, nor as task and finish. It is intended more as a facilitated but informal meeting to share understanding and ideas. I will provide the biscuits as usual. At this stage, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Sarah Cretney for more detail on the Q2 indicators, which remain interim as we will continue to improve this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lyshan. So as you're aware, the report you have in front of you sets out our performance against the agreed set of interim performance indicators, which have been organised under one of the 4 council plan priorities or the supporting priority of a financially sustainable and resilient council. We are currently in the process, as Councillor Lyshan says, of reviewing the set of measures to better reflect each council plan priority and provide a more even distribution of measures across the priorities, and be looking at not only those indicators that we are required to report on as part of national indicator reporting, but those that make sense to us in Somerset to report on, very much focusing on measuring what matters. And we will be providing a report on this in the new year. Appendix A sets out the performance indicators in detail, and following feedback from scrutiny and from executive, we have made some changes to the report, including adding the narrative to each measure, so that sits within the report rather than separate. It's also worth noting that the first targeted deep dive at the Performance Risk and Budget Board looked at the fostering service, and as a result of this deep dive, the measures within the quarterly reporting have been expanded to reflect the discussions at that meeting. A programme of further deep dives is planned throughout the year. This report also contains several housing measures that are now reflecting joint reporting between Homes in Sedgemoor and Somerset Council in-house provision. This has been backdated to include information on Q1. Key issues are identified in Appendix A and supported narrative provided under the relevant priorities. Over to you for questions.
Thank you. Looking for question or comment? No, I'm looking like I've got nothing from lead members or associate lead members, and go to Diogo.
Thank you, Chair. As always, I quite enjoyed reading this particular report, and it's generally speaking easy for me to read, so thank you. Just a couple of points really, just to that stands out to me on Appendix A, page 206, the total number of overdue Care Act assessments. Obviously, it's positive that there is a downward trend from April, and I've read the comments there in the box, but clearly still very concerning that you've got about 407 overdue compared to a target of 200. So that's still a concern. And I wondered if there is any pressure in regard to staffing to being able to complete that, or is it other pressures? And the second one on Appendix A on page 212, let me just scroll down, sorry. Page 212. I said page 212, now I can't see it on there. Oh no, yes I can, sorry. CF10, the percentage of educational education, health and care assessments completed within 20 weeks. Just noticing as well, with a target of 64%, the value at the minute is 26.09. Obviously very concerning, and again, just wanting some reassurance as to why that is, and if staffing again is a pressure.
Okay, so will we take the Care Act assessments first, Sarah?
Yes, thank you for asking about this. I mean, you will have noted, obviously, the downward trend in the figures. It was much higher in January, and we have got them down over a number of months. This is due to staffing pressures that to actually get these Care Act assessments done. They have to be done by qualified staff, and they are not a single day process. They take some time to complete. To have about 200 waiting is about normal in a normal situation, and we're doing I think about 50 a month or more than that. More than that. We're doing quite a lot per month to get this down. So I just wanted to reassure people really that this is a figure that did get too high. It was due partly to staff difficulties, particularly in the South Somerset area. But we've got this Newton helping us with this. Progress has made a difference. We've got a 30% productivity increase, and we've got this cohort of overseas workers as well who are also helping us once they come on stream. And so today's figure is 379, in case you're interested, of outstanding cases.
Thank you. Good to hear it's coming down, but for each of those, it's an individual case, and we need those assessments completed and that backlog cleared. Thank you very much. EHCPs, Heather?
Certainly make a start, and if I miss any detail, I'm sure Claire will keep me right. But and thank you for this question, and the question was also raised quite rightly at the corporate scrutiny, I think. Just to let you know that obviously we're concerned about this and have been for some time. We have been over the last 4 months, maybe 5 months, I guess a bit longer than that now. I lose track of time. We have been modelling and our process for education healthcare plans in totality. So actually working through the whole process model, which was lumpy, I think that might be the technical term. It wasn't the smoothest process we were running in-house to actually get education healthcare plans written well and quickly. There were, and so we're improving all of that. I think that unfortunately that downturn at the end where it's got sort of worse at 26% has coincided, I think, with some of the uncertainty and discomfort around the whole kind of reframing and restructuring of the organisation. Certainly the plans that we have that we're working on and consulting on are all geared around improving the way we can work with children coming forward, or parents coming forward with children with educational healthcare plans to make the process better. But until we can actually implement our new workforce strategy, those numbers won't change just yet. We do have a different way of working as well internally, which is that we try to focus differently. Well, obviously it says in here about focusing on those times, the children who are moving from one school to another to make sure they're right, but we're also identifying those children who perhaps present more complex needs and more disputed, let's say, healthcare plans, and they're being focused on trying to manage people's expectations that they may take a little longer, and we try to get the right resources to them. So I think that's our kind of response to it. But I think until we actually get through the restructuring that we have in plan as part of the whole consultation process, I think we might not see any changes until then. Would I be right in saying that, Claire?
To some degree. I think some of the reduction in EHCP plans on time is to do with phase transfer. So over the summer, we have the process of children moving between one school environment and another just because of their age. There's a lot of work that goes into that in terms of the most appropriate school for that child to move on to. And that tends to mean that things underneath in terms of the general processing of other work in the SEND team falls away to some degree. The new structure, as Councillor Shearer says, will help us with that, because actually we won't be so dependent on the same team members doing all the work. We will split it into different sections. So phase transfers will be the work of one team and the ongoing work will be the work of another team. So it should even out over time, but we're looking to at least April in terms of a new structure coming in to be able to make that more appropriate. And obviously April is the beginning of the phase transfer window as well, so it's a bit complicated, but we're confident we'll be able to do that over time.
Thank you. Francis Nicholson. Francis.
Right, well, is this one working? Yeah, it is. Thank you very much. Helpful to have the April as a target for things changing. I absolutely understand the complications and difficulties, and I applaud the dealing with what might be called stuck cases and things that have been really difficult, and that does take longer. That does mean a dip in performance. But what I'm hoping is that we won't have that because there won't be stuck cases that haven't been dealt with. And I'd like a bit of reassurance on that. And secondly, phase transfers happen every year. And I would like to hear a little bit more about how we're going to make sure that next year the new structure and the new arrangements will stop us going into the same dip because of phase transfers that we know are going to happen.
So as I said, phase transfers will be in a different team in the new structure, so it should be less of an issue. And the ongoing work will be in the other teams. Can't remember the other part of your question.
It's about backlogs as well.
Or backlogs. Yes, so stuck cases, we have identified, as you know, a large quantity of those, but now we've identified, we're working through the backlog of those children to make sure every child has the education they're entitled to in terms of the number of hours as well as the provision. There are fewer stuck cases because actually as those cases come up, we now have a process to deal with them. So it should be much more, it should flow much more easily. That one of the consequences of that, of course, is that where children have been stuck, they have not had the right education provision, and that is what, in large part, what is causing the increased overspend on the DSG. As those children get the most appropriate provision, it tends to be in specialist or needing support, additional support, and that is driving cost into the DSG. But unfortunately, it's appropriate in that those children now do have the right provision.
Say absolutely not dealing with something means it's more expensive when you do deal with it because things have got worse. But the other bit is we are absolutely aware how hard everybody's working to get through the backlog. How big is the backlog now? Do we think that we are still needing to identify more cases that will to add to the backlog? Because I know we did underestimate to begin with how many there were. But a bit about the size of the problem that you're still addressing.
To be honest, I don't know how big the backlog is at the moment because I haven't looked in the last couple of weeks, but I can get that information to you.
Thank you. Am I seeing any more questions or comments? Not seeing anything, so move to the recommendations, which is that the executive review the performance information provided with Appendix A and in particular the narrative relating to performance this quarter. Can I see a proposer for that recommendation? Councillor Lyshawn, seconded by Councillor Shearer. Those in favour, those against, that's clearly carried. We are scheduled to comfort break at we're well ahead. So if we go to the council tax reduction scheme, item 11 on your sheets, and ask Councillor Liz Lyshawn to introduce, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Council tax reduction scheme has been considered twice by scrutiny, and as colleagues, I'm sure that you have heard me talking about this a great deal. We're joined in the room as well as with our 151 officer and service director for finance and procurement by Sean Warren. So if I need any technical assistance, I know that I will be ably served by Sean being in the room. So if I could just introduce by saying that this report is required every year, as Somerset Council is now the billing authority for all the households in Somerset. That is a total of 271,342 taxable households, with a further 5,232 non-taxable households. For instance, those that are homes to students only. So the 31,745 households currently claiming a reduction on their council tax in this financial year represents 11.7% of the total taxable properties. And of these claimants, 13,431, apologies for all of these figures, 13,431 are people of state pension age where government mandates the scheme and Somerset Council covers the cost, which is 13.1 million this year. 18,314 are people of working age, and 37% of that number are currently claiming the 100% reduction on their council tax. The cost for Somerset Council currently is 15.2 million. I'd like colleagues to note that the responses from the consultation are based on our original proposal to reduce from percentages of 100, 75, 40 and 25% to 75, 50, 25 and 10%. You'll know that this is now amended to 100%, 50%, 25 and 10%. Please note too that the response in the papers from Citizens Advice that was dated in September includes comments on the two parts of the consultation that Executive removed at our July meeting. Citizens Advice have continued to engage with them. We will continue to engage with them, and we thank them for their time and their careful consideration on behalf of the people of Somerset. So this paper follows the Executive's decision to put forward a revision of percentages that retains the 100% reduction, so that we are not asking people to pay council tax when they are living on the lowest household incomes. And of course, it costs the council money to chase very small payments. This is in line with the recommendation for corporate and resources scrutiny back in August of this year. However, we have other percentages proposed to be reduced in order to establish a saving. And we acknowledge that this can reduce the income of vulnerable people, but we need to establish a sustainable budget for Somerset Council so that we can provide services as statutorily required for vulnerable people. This, colleagues, is what people say, what they mean when they say we are between a rock and a hard place. So this is a position that no council and no councillor wishes to find themselves in, but it is an indication of just how difficult council budgets are now and how council tax is both unfair and an unsatisfactory way to fund statutory care services. So the other three parts of our proposed changes to council tax reduction scheme, also presented to scrutiny, are included in this paper as per the consultation and its findings. Corporate and resources scrutiny further considered the council tax reduction scheme in November, a week ago, and although comments of concern were heard clearly, a majority of scrutiny members supported the changes to council tax reduction in its current form. However, lead members do believe that we need to look further and we need to look harder to ensure that we do protect those families on the lowest incomes. And we will be proposing two further recommendations to this paper. Chair, do you wish me to take those recommendations now at this stage? So there are two recommendations. In effect, they top and tail the recommendations that we have in the paper. They are, first of all, for the leader to write to the Minister for Local Government to explore the case for Somerset Council's council tax to be raised by more than the referendum limit due to the exceptional financial support already requested, our low council tax base and rate, the increasing demand for services, and taking into account the government's requirement that plans be in place to protect vulnerable people. Our second additional recommendation is to ask officers to urgently investigate and report back on the potential to use an element of household support fund to support those who may be affected by future changes to council tax reduction scheme thresholds. Those are our 2 additional recommendations to this paper. I know that you have all read many papers on council tax reduction scheme. I know that it is as important to all of you as it is to me. I am, of course, Chair, happy to take questions, and I will be calling on the experience and the knowledge of our officers to support me in answering those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, for those comments. I do think it's important to remember we did a consultation last year around our council tax level, and 51% of the respondents in that consultation said that they would prefer us to increase council tax to the national average and protect services, and 33% were against that approach. So we have a clear from that survey, we had a clear mandate, and we did last year approach government for increased the ability to increase council tax by above the referendum limit. I was struck on Friday by the policy announcement from government talking about bespoke referendum arrangements for those authorities in financial distress to be able to speak to government about exceeding the referendum limits. And it talked about those councils which are below average council tax and have strong arrangements in place to support those people less well off. We know that this is the council tax is not a fair tax. And it is a completely inappropriate tax for which to fund social care, which is it's the main mechanism for funding at the moment. A tax on 1991 property values is not going to deliver the outcome where there is most in need because of the varying degrees of council tax base. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the executive? Councillor Federica Smith-Roberts.
I'd like to talk on the amendments first, and then on the substantive motion, if that's okay. I really welcome those changes that we're bringing forward to add to the recommendations. As you've said, Bill, we asked government to be able to, control our own destiny because of the challenges that we were facing, and that wasn't possible last year. So I do think that it's right that we should be able to, based on that policy paper that only came out last week, that we can, ask government to be able to make changes that means that hopefully we can look to ensure or protect the savings that we are currently proposing that would impact on some of the most vulnerable in our community having the ability to pay their council tax. So I do welcome those coming forward. So I'm happy to vote for those. When it comes to the substantive motion, if that goes through, unfortunately, I will put it on record that I will need to abstain from those recommendations as it is. I feel uncomfortable at the moment in being able to support changes that impact our residents. With some, I think if I've understood, the paper here correctly, that a lone parent with one child may be having to find an additional £8.69 a week. When that comes to it, that's £35 a month. That these are people that have hardly any income coming in anyhow. We know that they are in vulnerable circumstances, and I feel uncomfortable in having to make those decisions that would put them in a worse off financial position when we've got the ability for central government to fund councils correctly, to be able to give us to our ability to control our own destiny like we asked for last year. And so that those that have the least can hopefully be provided for by asking the rest of the general population to actually help them with their lives. And I think that would be the right thing to do. One of my questions, or I've got 2 questions for when we bring that information forward as we move towards full council. One is if we can use the household support fund, I'd like to understand what we're not doing by using that money. So to have a better report and understanding on what the household support does. Because when we look to use that money, we are surely then not using it for something else that means people suffer in a different way. We need to have dialogues with our voluntary sector, because people will turn to the voluntary sector for additional support. Nothing comes for free. Everything has a consequence. So I would like to understand that. We've seen also in the equality impact assessment, when looking at the savings that we need to make, some of those individuals that are going to be impacted. It would be good to understand. I know we've got the CAB report here in front of us. It would be good to reach out to, such as an example, the disability charities, to see if they've got an understanding of what that will be and what kind of impact that will have on them. And then I think my final question, and sorry, I've hogged the mic for a little while, but I just feel very passionately about when we look at vulnerable individuals, that we're doing what we can to mitigate circumstances to them, is whether we've got the details of those who are currently receiving our council tax support. Those are on 12-month payment terms, so that, and whether we can drill that down into the rate of discount that they're currently getting, because not lots of people don't realise, and maybe I'm wrong and others can correct me on that, that, you know, people can split that money over 12 months rather than what was held as a traditional 10, so it can help them budget further. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Federica. Yeah, I said when we declared the financial emergency that we would need to make heartbreaking and difficult decisions, and yeah, this is very much in the realm of that. It was also about making the most of opportunity while taking care of those most in need, and I'm fully cognizant of that as we go through this process. So the three questions that were there was the opportunity cost of the household support fund, the impacts that would have on disabled feedback from charity sector, and the importance of promoting the 12-month payment option. Let's take those, Liz.
Yeah, if I could start, Chair, I'll do my best. I may need some professional assistance. On the Household Support Fund, we have changed how we've used that this winter. And my colleagues, Councillors Shearer and Wakefield, will recall the key decision that was taken about how we would use that money. Government has announced that the next financial year, the Household Support Fund will be there for the whole year. That is incredibly helpful to know about that in advance, and that will enable us to work with Citizens Advice, all of our own officers, Somerset Community Foundation and others, to see how best we can use that money and to ensure that it is used absolutely every penny does the best it can. I don't believe that we can say any more at this stage. I think it is about how we use the next financial year of Household Support Fund, and indeed we don't yet know exactly how much that will be. You can estimate from the government's total that it should be something like previous years, but we don't know how this new government will allocate money across the council areas yet. On disabled charities, I would like us to work through Citizens Advice on this to ensure that we get the best possible information. And I wonder if I can come to Sean Warren on this, and also on the 12-month payments rather than 10-month, whether you can give us any, enlighten us at all on those two matters, please, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
Firstly, on the county tax reduction, members of our community on 12-month payment plans, we don't hold those details at the moment, but we can interrogate the systems to find those details. I would just add the caveat that, as you may be aware, that we are still on 4 separate systems, and they do all work in 4 separate ways. So we will obviously interrogate as best we can to obtain that information. With regards to the disability charities and the impacts, we have had communication from Citizens Advice last week, who want to meet with us further to discuss impacts of the proposals that are being made, and we will be inviting them to a meeting to obviously discuss what we can do jointly together to minimise the impacts on people.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Council tax is fundamentally unfair and unsustainable tax. It's unfair because it's based on, as you said, it's based on 1991 property values on a house which you may or may not own, but which you live in, and has no regard to your income. It's unsustainable because it's funding things which it was never envisaged when it was set up in the 1990s as a temporary replacement for the poll tax, never expected to last this long, really. It was funding things in a completely different way. And this is what happens when an unfair and unsustainable tax meets a financial emergency. We are getting to the stage of having to make probably the most difficult and heartbreaking of the decisions that we have seen since the financial emergency was declared. And I don't think we should be having to do this. I think many of us remember not that long ago when, instead of having locally set council tax support and council tax reduction schemes, we had a nationally funded and set up council tax benefit. And frankly, when you look at the interplay between a scheme such as this and the rest of the welfare and benefits system, it is phenomenally complex, and actually trying to set up a scheme like this in isolation it probably demonstrates why that was done nationally for so long. And of course, what we're trying to do is take a tax that isn't based on your income and make it fair based on your income. Now, that's never going to work terribly well. I think historically, since, I remember this coming to the scrutiny committee I was on at the time in 2022. And I think I remember saying at the time that I think we'd made it basically as fair as it could be, but it's still fundamentally unfair. So I have enormous misgivings about making any sorts of negative changes to this scheme, which I think is something, the creation of this scheme as it stands, building on the great work that was done in South Somerset before the creation of the Somerset Council. I think the creation of this scheme is something that we should be enormously proud of. But we're facing a financial emergency, so we've accepted that we have to look at the really tough decisions. I think if we hadn't had the two additions to these proposals, based on the fact that the government, which always likes to spring stuff on us at the last minute, announced on Thursday, Friday, the local government finance policy statement, which specifically said that councils such as ours, which had exceptional financial support, which had below average council tax, and which had decent systems in place to support the most vulnerable, i.e. a decent council tax reduction scheme, would be ones where they were open to discussing bespoke arrangements for council tax levels. I think if that hadn't all come along when it did, I would be struggling to vote for these recommendations. But because we have been able to bring forward these two additional recommendations, and despite the fact that I have enormous concerns about making the changes that are envisaged in these papers, I think I am prepared to let them go forward today as a recommendation to full council, on the understanding that we will be spending the next 2 weeks or so doing everything we can to work on that mitigation and doing everything we can to ensure that we have those conversations with government to make sure we really understand what the options are, and if they are genuinely prepared to make good on what they implied they would do in last week's local government finance policy statement. So without any enthusiasm whatsoever, I'll be voting for these recommendations. With a great deal more enthusiasm, I'll be voting for the amendment that have been articulated. And I look forward to the 18th of December, when I very much hope we'll be able to come up with something considerably more optimistic.
Thank you, Theo. I did have you down, Sarah, didn't I? Yes. Yes, I did. Sorry, Sarah. Yeah, I'll go to Sarah and then to Heather.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is incredibly difficult, and I welcome the remarks of both my two colleagues on the executive about what they've said and how difficult it is. And it is a misplaced tax, badly put together, not updated, and it just simply doesn't work for what it's meant to do. So I agree with all that. And it's with a heavy heart that we even consider making alterations. However, I do think the bans we're now suggesting are more simple and straightforward. And I think there'll be a number of people who say, right, I don't have to pay any council tax, that's it. There's a lot of mitigations, and people can claim in various different ways. It's complicated, but I hope it will be simpler to administer. I'm still attracted by the figures that show that we don't collect £37.1 million of council tax as a result of the scheme, of which income to Somerset Council is 28.3 million in the report. That is something which I find really difficult, because the government say you should be able to collect that, and then say, well, you can't. And we say we can't, they say you can't in some instances. It makes it very difficult to do figures and to work out what you're actually going to get. I totally accept we should not be trying to get money from people who can't afford to pay. And I think it's disgraceful that we have to even contemplate doing that. Having said all that, we have got to keep this council afloat. And I think that this small saving, it's relatively small in terms of the total budget, should be made. But I really, really hope that they're listening in government about this. We must be allowed to catch up with our council tax setting, because we are behind because of those 6 years of the budget of the council tax not being raised at all. We are behind other local authorities in what we can claim, and we must get that back on an even footing so that we can actually start to make sense of what we're doing in this council and make it financially viable going forward, which is what we're all trying to do. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I think there's a remarkable amount of, as usual, a remarkable amount of, let's say, shared understanding or shared position and shared thoughts and feelings about the decision makers around the table. None of us want to do this. And I think people have said it before me far better than I'm going to, so I won't say it again. I agree with everything that's been said previously. I think what's important is, for all kinds of reasons, it's really important that we have a council tax reduction scheme that works for our most vulnerable people and for everybody, in fact. And I think it's also important that we have other things in place that mitigate. And certainly we've heard a little bit about the household support fund so far. There's also the exceptional hardship, or the hardship fund. And I'm very keen just to be reminded, because I was reminded when reading through the papers again about the citizens' advice, feeling that some of our access to that hardship fund was a little more complicated than it might be. So I think it's great that the new the additional supplementary recommendations are coming in and affording us some time to look at that. But I would like to hear whether we have already thought about how accessible our hardship fund is, because that's a key, that along with the household support fund, is a key mitigator, I think, on those people who might be finding difficulties. So I don't know if we could hear just a little bit more about the hardship fund, please.
Yeah, I will call Shawl in. With the exceptional hardship scheme, on the small number of pieces of casework I've dealt with, it does require income and expenditure for, I think, all members, all earning members, well, all adult members of the household. So it does have to be done on a case-by-case basis. I don't know if there's anything you can add to that, please, Sean.
The exceptional hardship scheme by itself is necessarily, it poses questions that people may find personal, but obviously we do need to establish whether somebody can't pay, whether they won't pay. Obviously, I've taken on board the comments that have been made by scrutiny last week and from the executive meetings that I have attended, as well as the feedback that we've had through consultation. And we will be reviewing the application process for exceptional hardships on the basis that the feedback we are getting is that they are complex. However, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll become payable upon application. Questions will still need to be asked and evidence will still need to be provided, but it will be dealt with in a sensitive manner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to reiterate what everybody else has said. I'm just going to ask for a little bit of clarity on the two, in particular the first recommendation, what the implications are of either a positive conversation or a negative conversation on the whole piece moving forward.
Thank you. So the first recommendation is to write so the Minister to explore what is possible as a result of the policy statement that was given last week. The term bespoke referendum arrangements wasn't straightforward in terms of what we understand it to mean, and what we need to just establish is the next phrases that were in there, which were below national average. And that there was a significant mitigation for those who were in need. We had a briefing for council leaders on Friday, at which I also pushed on the point of low council tax base, which we also have here in Somerset, and would that be taken into account? And I was assured that it would be. So we have a number of factors that would be in there, as I think would be a persuasive case, and the consultation that we did last year would indicate that our residents would be in support of that approach. What the size of that bespoke referendum arrangement might be, whether it's 1%, 2% or more, we don't know. I believe the cost of the scheme is approximately 1% on council tax. So if we move forwards, if we got an affirmative quickly, we could in theory revert to the previous scheme by full council. That would be the optimum position. I doubt we will get that assurance that quickly, from my experience, but we do not know. If we don't get any assurance, then unfortunately, I think we'll have to proceed with the changes that are within the paper. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I should add, Chair, that the second recommendation as written in the paper is to recommend full council approve the increase by CPI rate of 1.7%. That recommendation stands as written, whatever else we are agreeing at this meeting, and I haven't mentioned that and I felt I should do.
Councillor Rigby, I was told you wanted to speak and you haven't made eye contact with me, and I wasn't sure whether that was the case or not.
I apologise for not gazing longingly in your direction, Leader.
I'm sure you'll put this right.
Is that good enough? I want to break a rule that I've tried to set in planning meetings, where I'm discouraging councillors from speaking merely to agree with people who've spoken before, but I'll do it in 15 seconds. I thought Theo spoke very eloquently. I agree with everything he said, and much of what other councillors have said too. I don't have anything further to add, but I thought it was on an issue of this importance that I'd better just make my position clear. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the outdooring looks as well. I feel very warm and fuzzy inside. Right, we move on to other councillors next. I've got Councillor Dave Mansell on line first, and then Diogo.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, right. Yes, I obviously noted the debate and the difficulty over this decision. Agree very much with the concerns that have been expressed, including by Federica and Theo. And Theo, I do agree with the point that you made when we looked at this previously, when this current scheme was first set up. I agree. I think we had it about right. But now we're looking to change it, and it does cause me concern, I think, for good reason. I did speak about this when it came to scrutiny last Monday. Now, at that time, we didn't know what the government was going to announce last Thursday, when their local government finance statement was published. So we now know that there is the possibility that they will consider further increases in council tax, and it does look like Somerset Council needs to do that for many reasons, this being one of them. But if we do, as is a requirement indicated by government, we need to have a scheme that protects vulnerable residents, including those on low incomes, which is what this is all about. Now, we didn't know about this possibility when it went to scrutiny, so there's been changed circumstances. For that reason, and also because, as I understand it, once you've taken the decision, this decision then sticks. I really feel that this decision today needs to be deferred until it is known what results from exploring the potential to increase council tax, which, as you gathered, I welcome. So I really do think that you need to defer the decision today, and I will very quickly just highlight some of the problems with the changes that are presented, which does remove from what is a scheme that has looked okay to one that I judge is not okay. So there's proposed for changes in discount bands, keeping the one at 100%, but for people on lower incomes, their discount is going to reduce. So those who currently have 75% discount will go down to 50%. Those on 40% go down to 25%. Those on 25% down to 10%. So there is a reduction in the discount for those on the lowest incomes. And just to illustrate what that means, it means, from my reading of the paper, that if you're a couple with two children and you have income of only £14,450 per year, your discount is going to reduce. You're going to have to pay more council tax when you're on an income as a family of only £14,450. If you're a single parent with one child, you will pay more if you have an income of £8,900 per year. If you're a single person, which are most of the claimants, or that's the biggest category of claimants, if your income is £5,300 per annum, your discount will reduce. And I just don't think we should be contemplating that. Their incomes are low enough already. As said, there's all sorts of problems with the council tax and how things work. This is one thing trying to put it right. And it should be noted that from the consultation, those affected, a very big majority said don't change it. That was the overwhelming response from the consultation amongst those who were affected. So do please note that. The other one which I would draw attention to, as I did at scrutiny, was the reduced period for backdating claims to only 1 calendar month. Currently it's 12 months. And it's discretionary. So officers only do it when they think it important and there's real need to do it. Now, according to the reports that we've had, other councils backdate for periods between roughly 3 months and 6 months. Taking it down to 1 month, I think, is going too far. So those two areas in particular in the proposals cause me problems. If we can avoid them, and it looks as though there is the possibility to do that now, at least by exploring what can happen with the council tax, and we should know what that possibility is before taking this decision. And so for that reason, as said, I strongly urge you to defer and bring it back to a future meeting when you have more information and sufficient information on which to take what this very difficult decision, as you have been acknowledging. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you for appreciating the difficulty behind this decision. We have taken advice on deferral, and I'll just pass on to Chief Executive for his advice on that.
Thank you, Leader. I think Councillor Mansell's quite accurately picking up the issue we have when government policy announcement on local government finance was announced last week. We have to set a budget in February. We have to be ready for billing, and the council tax scheme needs to be set in place before that point. I think you just said yourself, Councillor, that we want to know the position on council tax before we make this decision. That's not going to be possible. If we don't make this decision in the near future, we won't be able to implement the decision for next year, whatever the decision is, because of the lead-in times, billing and everything else, and it has to be in place before the budget meeting. When we were trying to talk to government last year about council tax and referendum, I think we got the final decision from them in March. Technically, I think the headline was coming out in a meeting just before our budget setting, and the final decision was March. So we will not be able to find out unless something dramatically changes with the mechanisms of government what the answer is on this council tax point that's just been raised last week, in advance of making this decision. Otherwise, virtually certainly we won't have this decision in place for next year, which would create a significant gap potentially in the budget. Just remind everyone that we are still nearly £54 million short of a balanced budget for next year. Whilst I think this is one of the things that we've all been proudest of with the new council, this scheme is something that we were really pleased when we set it. We're able to build on the good work that had been done by predecessor councils and councillors. But unfortunately, we are in a financial crisis, and we're trying to make sure we can balance whilst protecting people as best we can. The advice is that we have to take a decision in the near future on this, which means not deferring today, but that if we can get the secure the agreement from government, that we of course come back and mitigate the impact of that decision. If we can't get the agreement, we can't really be left in a position where there's no longer time to implement the scheme, because the scheme does need to apply for the whole of next year.
Okay, and go to Liz Lysham to respond on your other points.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make 2 points. One is about the weekly income you see in the banding table. So I'll look to Sean to confirm this. My understanding is that is after the disregards, of which there are many. Is that correct for each case?
This is correct, yes.
So that is not a gross income. Indeed, I can't imagine how anyone could live on £104 a week these days. So that is after all of the disregards, and colleagues will remember that 2 of the parts of the consultation we took out back in July, one of those was very significant on the disregards. And on the 1 month or the previous 12 months, certainly on the 12 months, we were an outlier as a council, that was not where other councils were. But I also want to make the point, Chair, because I've not done it yet, and it's been remiss of me not to, how much support our officers are able to give to claimants when they come forward, either if they come forward through the Universal Credit Scheme or if they come forward through citizens' advice or any other method. We are able to ensure that people are getting all of the benefits through VWP that they are entitled to, and we are able to direct them to those who can help them best find ways to balance their household budget. So I just wanted to make those points, but particularly, colleagues, when you look at the banding table, understand that that is after disregards, and there are certain benefits like income support that put people straight in at the 100% discount on their council tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, do I take it you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I will be quick. Just firstly on that point about the disregards, I would need to look at it further to understand that. I was taking my comments from the report that originally went to scrutiny explaining the changes, and that report, I'm just looking at it again now, clearly states that it's talking about people's weekly income. Which I believe was the figures that I quoted. So this appeared to be so that was my understanding from the report, and at the moment it still is until I've had a chance, I guess, to work through it and see that there's something different. I believe I got what I said I got right, that those are the incomes that apply. So one further comment, well, 2 further comments briefly, if I may. One, if it can be deferred by any length of period, I think that is beneficial, because clearly the announcement on council tax only came out last Thursday. More information is needed. We're dealing with a new government now who may take a different position to the last one. There isn't a general election pending in the same way. So I think it is beneficial to find out more, to explore the council tax as is now proposed, and see what can be found out before this decision has to be taken. And if it can be deferred by a bit to get a bit more helpful information in, I would suggest that would be valuable and ensure the right decision results. And in that regard, I do feel it's best to get the council tax reduction scheme right. As has been mentioned in the debate, mitigations make it much more complicated for residents to get support. There may be more intrusive questions asked. I just think that will create difficulties for people and more administration for the council. It'd be much, and also there's the potential, if we're relying on the household support fund to help people, that can be withdrawn in the future, and then that causes a problem. It just seems much simpler and better to me to get the council tax reduction scheme as right as we can get it, and a small deferral looks beneficial to me. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I believe the final decision on this would rest with full council anyway, so it's an agree and recommend to full council. We could, of course, amend this at full council should anything happen. So in effect, there would be a deferral with the addition of the amendment. Liz, were you want to come in on another point?
I just wanted to check, when DWP backdate benefits, do they backdate by 1 month or by longer? Do you know, Sean, please?
Majority of cases for working age people, it's 1 calendar month. And it's 3 calendar months for pension age people.
Seems a bit unfair, doesn't it? So that's a DWP rule. 1 month for working age, 3 months for pension age, is that correct?
With certain benefits that they administer, yes, that's correct.
So, Chair, I wonder whether, as well as the 2 additional recommendations, whether we could propose today to backdate by 3 months rather than by 1 month, taking the best practice of DWP rather than the lesser practice. Would that find favour with colleagues?
I'm generally seeing nods around the table, so if we put some words to the amendment when we take them.
I think the order we take these recommendations in is really important too. I don't know whether this is the best time for me to give you my idea of the right order of recommendations, or whether you want to take more questions.
We've got Councillor Rodriguez patiently waiting, and Councillor Chilcott as well. So if I take their points, just in case we want to take anything that they say, and then we'll go on to the amendment procedure that we get that through. So Diego, please.
Thank you, Chair. So looking at this report, I do welcome that the recommendation that CNR Scrutiny made, which was not to remove the 100% band, has been taken on board. The principle behind that, me being a member of that committee, the principle behind that was that those with the lowest incomes would be most unlikely to find the extra income to pay any additional council tax. That was the core principle behind making that recommendation. So with that same principle, I want to refer to the equality impact assessment, particularly on the disability protected group element. You'll see in that report that the changes being proposed mean that 5,606 disabled households will see a reduction in their CTR through the proposed changes. That's an average of £9.03 a week, or £470 for disabled households. These same households, the same as those in the lowest incomes, are those that have little means to increasing their incomes. And we know that the majority or many of these will be looking to the exceptional hardship scheme. I'm really concerned, Mr. Chairman, that disabled households will be disproportionately affected by these changes. This executive once spoke about putting the heart in Somerset. There is no heart in bringing 5,600 disabled households into possible financial hardship. I agree with the points that Councillor Mansell has made on the backdating of the council tax reduction claim, and I'm pleased to hear the recommendation made by Councillor Lation there. And I want to go to the 2 additional recommendations, Chairman, that you made. I'm concerned and support Councillor Smith-Roberts's comments on the household support fund and the concern around how much can that particular fund actually support. So I feel like we're putting a lot of pressure on that. But the one that I'm a bit confused about is the letter that will be written to the government asking for the referendum limit to be increased. Clearly that indicates that this council wants to, or this executive wants to increase the council tax further than what it already can. But there is one lever that this executive is not pulling, which it could, because it does call itself, this council, a listening council. It could, if it so wished, hold a referendum on increasing council tax. That's one lever at your disposal that you've chosen not to do, for whatever reason, but you could. If you want to increase council tax further than the current limit, then why don't you hold a referendum on the council tax and listen to the residents as you promised in your manifesto?
Just to remind you that in our consultation last year, 51% of residents did support that. And interested to note that Hampshire Conservative Controlled Authority did the same exercise and got a similar result, and is also not going for a referendum. But Councillor Liz Lyshan.
I just want to make the point that with the policy statement last week, government have introduced a new additional option, which is not the recommendation, the referendum recommendation we would have had to go for a year ago, and where our then 151 officer reminded us constantly that actually that referendum process was well designed to fail and actually took up a huge amount more officer time, and that we would not be well served by it. So this new option that the Minister for Local Government has suggested might come forward for certain councils, when we believe that this is one of them, is the option that we are asking, well, that the leader is asking the Minister to explore for Somerset Council. So we are in a different position than we were a year ago. I believe it may be a more promising situation that we're in now, but none of us would wish to predict where that may go. And that is why I believe we still need the recommendations in this paper, plus our additional recommendations and the amendment to 3 months of backdating instead of 1 month. So when you're ready, Chair, I will run through the order that I think the recommendation should come in.
Councillor Rigby has indicated, and I think Councillor Frederick Smith-Roberts have indicated. So I'll go to Councillor Rigby, and I've forgotten Councillor Chilcott. I'm sorry. Do you wish to respond to a point that was made by Councillor Rodriguez?
It was just a really quick question. Can someone tell me what the cost of a referendum would be, please?
I'm doing this from memory, Leader. I remember last year we said something between £500,000 and £1 million for the rebilling and consultation. And it's not all on the voting, it's the impact on the billing and everything else you've got to do. But I'm afraid that is totally from memory, and I wouldn't want to stand by those figures. It was of that order, I recall.
Thank you. I suggest we might find better things to do with that money.
Thank you. Councillor Chilcott.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity to ask some questions. I too have concerns about the use of the Household Support Fund. I think we've had it muted in several meetings that it could be used. I would really love a written response if necessary to understand, as Councillor Smith-Roberts has said, how we're going to spend it and who we're expecting to claim on it. My concern is we get to a position where that needs to be overspent. And I'd just like some assurance around that. That would be helpful. My second question is actually to the Chief Executive. And when this piece of work was first going out to consultation, this executive decided that some elements that were in the original paper would not be consulted upon. And I think there was a fairly stark words from the Chief Executive to say, if you didn't consult on that, that would have an impact elsewhere. Now, we've heard earlier about impact decisions in one place impacting elsewhere. I'd just like to understand, you know, where we are looking at those impacts hitting of not consulting. That's my first question, please.
Not entirely sure I quite follow the question, Chair, but I'll give it a go. If I get it wrong, please correct me. Sorry.
I can try and make it clearer for you. When we first looked at this scheme, there were some elements of it you decided not to consult on. They were changed in the meeting, and you actually said that if they were not consulted on, that would have other impacts on the council. So I'm just trying to understand, first of all, what those impacts could be.
So yes, the point that was being made was obviously when we looked at shaping the key lines of inquiry for budget setting for 25-26, back in April as executive, we put the range of figures in that were potentially available, which might help us balance the budget from the council tax reduction scheme. As we've gone through the process effectively, members have rightly taken decisions through executive, which has actually honed the proposals, the proposals you see today. The previous decision was not to consult on some more significant changes to thresholds. Obviously, that means that the top end saving that we might have seen from the key line of inquiry isn't available. Therefore, we look at savings in other places. It's pretty much how we set the budget all the way through. We work through all the options available to us until we come down with a combination of options, which actually allows members to set a legally balanced budget, but in a way that the administration, obviously, and full council are happy to support democratically, so that's a budget they're comfortable to set. These aren't easy. Talking about the next paper, I appreciate we've changed the order of the agenda. Members will be able to see where we are with the key lines of inquiry and what that means for the budget setting. But we've got to bear in mind that the reason we're under the financial pressure in the main is because we're seeing huge demand and cost increase for the cost of care across the board. So therefore, we are always talking about actually investing in supporting people and looking after people. The really difficult questions that democratically elected councils have got to work through is how do we best do that? You know, there are no easy options here. There isn't enough money to support all the people who need support the way we'd like to. And this is about how do we actually prioritise and make that work. So those are the trade-offs that we will have all the way through to February. I know you know that in the budget setting, but obviously the more we reduce any of those potential key lines of inquiry down, the more pressure on the other aspects that we have to fund the deficit.
Thank you. Just two more questions. I'll be brief because I know we've had a long discussion. I wrote to one of her officers that's no longer with us actually back in July with concerns around working people and those that were just about managing. I think we've had a lot of dialogue around gateway benefits and how some, if you get one benefit, will suddenly click on and others will follow. My concern is for so many in Somerset that just sit outside a lot of the benefits that would click them into this scheme today. And I did ask last year and for this for some figures around those that weren't paying, because I know historically when I've looked at figures in the district, those that were struggling the most were not those on some of the benefits, but just outside of it. I haven't seen those figures. I would ask again that they come forward next year so that we can be assured that decisions that are made actually will be benefiting those that most need it. And I'll leave that as a comment if I may. My last comment is around the increase or the request for an increase in council tax moving forwards and the amendment that's been made. When I look back at a lot of the towns and parishes in Somerset last year, they have done some fantastic work with devolution, but that has hit a lot of our families in the pocket. And when I look at some of the towns and parishes, they were looking at 160, 170% increases. And my concern is that by putting the council tax up, this is another pressure on working families in the country. And I will leave it at that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Lyson, do you want to respond?
Just a couple of responses, please. The exceptional hardship scheme is open to everyone, not just those claiming CTRS. So anybody who is struggling, and there are lots of reasons why people do struggle with council tax, including serious illness, bereavement in family. So do understand, and that is why the exceptional hardship scheme is there. I have got the figures where parish precepts are now higher, and so we do vary from those where there are parish meetings with no additional precepts. There are only very few places in Somerset where you'd pay more on a bandy, even with the higher parish precept, than you would in Dorset. So just across the border, the difference is really stark. And if you ever look on one of the maps that is produced that shows where council tax is higher and where it's lower, you see a really significant difference between Somerset and Dorset, as well as some of the other councils. So I do take your point about the parish precepts. I used to argue that point when I was at work all the time, that the people in street paid additional money through their parish precept to keep Strode Theatre open after the county and district withdrew arts funding. But many of the audience came from the villages around or the towns around, and they didn't pay any extra on their precept. That unfairness has been around, I think, for as long as council tax has been. And it's another point really on why council tax is so unfair as a way to fund local services. So, thank you.
Okay, I think we're reaching the point of moving. Oh, sorry, Fed. I slipped. You slipped off my list. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask some further questions, or whether I don't need an answer today, but whether the information can be ready for when we debate this at full council. One is around just further examples of the disregards. We've talked about a lot of that, in like the recent questions. And there's some really useful information on page 275 around the individual claim impact examples. But I do think that it would be useful, because we talk about where certain benefits that come from the national or the government will be disregarded. But my understanding on a lot of that, and I stand to be corrected or educated, that things such as personal independence payments are giving to people so that it lifts them up to a set amount so that they can do things that other people can't, that when they're receiving that. So I think when we then look at an example that's been given here on 275, that they will have to find an extra £290 a year, it again is having an impact on them from funds that were meant to be used for an additional purpose or something else, or that they are having to use that money to fund their electricity, their gas, their food, and maybe their housing that goes above the local housing allowance. And we're squeezing individuals where they just haven't got this money to spend. So I think that it's good to have further examples, just so that councillors can have an even further informed decision when they make this at full council. And then my second element, and I want to again check my understanding whether Liz or Maria or Sean can confirm, is that pensioners, we're mandated by central government to provide, I think, £16 million of funding through this that goes to pensioners, but there will be no change to that. So they may be living in the same circumstance as someone who's of working age, but they won't see a detrimental impact to them, because government says that you can't do that, but neither do government give us the funds, the 16 million, in order to provide this. So we're kind of again mandated as to what we can and can't do, and then we get a differential in the system as to those who are impacted. And I just want to check that I'm correct in that understanding.
Yes, in a word, and we've just heard how some DWP benefits are backdated 3 months for people of state pension age, but only 1 month when people are of working age. So I think it's perfectly fair to say that there is inherent unfairness in many benefits and claims and how they are administered. I agree.
Okay, Thea, briefly.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the disregards a bit, because I think it's really important. And it's really important that we all understand how they work and what they mean, and that actually this is to a large extent, this is the thing that Councillor Chilcott was referencing, that we took out in the summer. A lot of what we took out, a lot of the savings we took out was by refusing to consult on removing the disregards. We have disregards for income from disability benefits such as disability living allowance and personal independence allowance, that means that your income from those does not count towards the calculation of what your income is. And that comes back to Councillor Mansell's point. It's really important to note it's not a £14,000 income in general. In fact, for the example he was talking about, which is a two-person household with 2 kids, that doesn't include the child benefit, which would be over £2,000. So that's another an additional point. It doesn't include the housing element of universal credit. It doesn't include carers allowance. It doesn't include the support component of employment and support allowance. So it's just really important. And I think Councillor Smith-Roberts is absolutely right. It's really important that we have more information about this to make sure that we all understand actually what the numbers mean. We did a huge amount back in July to mitigate the worst impacts of what the changes might have been if we'd gone for the full saving. I still hate every single change that's being proposed, but I just think it is really important that we're all aware of how those disregards work.
Thank you, Theo. Okay, can we just go through the recommendations and the proposed amendments, please?
So, Chair, it'd be easier for me if I could read the 4 recommendations in the order I believe they should come. So I think our first recommendation is the current written recommendation 2. Agree and recommend that full council approve the increase to income band thresholds by the September 2024 CPI rate of 1.7%, in line with the percentage increase to state benefits as implemented by the DWP. So that is the first recommendation as written. The second recommendation to be our new recommendation, that the leader write to the Minister for Local Government to explore the case for Somerset Council's council tax to be raised by more than the referendum limit due to exceptional financial support requested, low council tax base and rate, increasing demand, and taking into account government's requirement that plans be in place to protect vulnerable people. And then the third recommendation be recommendation 1 as written, and agree and recommend that full council approve the council tax reduction and associated exceptional hardship scheme for 25-26 as set out in this paper, except for the reduction in backdating council tax reduction claim to 3 calendar months. And then as the fourth recommendation, that we ask officers to urgently investigate and report back on the potential to use an element of the Household Support Fund to support those who may be affected by future changes to council tax reduction scheme thresholds. So there are changes within those recommendations. I believe they work much better in that order, Chair.
Thank you. So that is proposed by Councillor Lyshawn.
Changes.
Well, you've proposed those changes. But do we need to take a separate vote on the amendments? No. Okay. So that becomes a substantive. So the substantive as proposed, seconded, Councillor Butt-Phillip. Those in favour of those against, and abstention. Thank you. Okay, we will take the item 12, the review of non-domestic rating discretionary rate relief and hardship policy next. After that, we will break for lunch. So the more concise we are, the less hungry we will be. Councillor Liz Lowson.
Thank you. So this is a review of the non-domestic rating discretionary rate relief and hardship policy. The paper follows changes that have been made by government at their first budget in October. And there are 3 parts to this paper. First part, to preclude private schools not entitled to mandatory rates relief from claiming a discretionary rates relief, top up or discount. So this is required, and I will go to officers for further explanation if I don't make it clear enough. It is required to ensure that the government's intention is not changed by any locally agreed discretionary rate. It applies to private schools that are registered charities. Therefore, not all private schools in Somerset will be affected. Secondly, is to reduce the relief award offer to the retail, hospitality and leisure sector from 75% to 40%. This will have impact in Somerset, although I understand those small businesses claiming discount due to the low rateable value will not be affected. And thirdly, to remove the local newspaper relief from the policy, which does not currently apply in Somerset, but is required for completeness on these recommendations. Thank you, Chair. Very happy to hand over to officers for any further information we need.
I think that's pretty much summed it up. Nothing else to say, Liz.
Cool. Do we have some hungry officers? Okay, comments from league members. Federica Smith-Roberts.
I'm happy for this to be a written answer, but if I've understood correctly, we are reducing the relief award offered to the retail, hospitality and leisure sector. So just want to understand separately what the impact is on our contractors that provide leisure facilities for and on our behalf. So to see if there is an impact there, just so that we can work that through across our 4 different ways of delivering leisure in Somerset.
Yeah, that's no problem. We can take that away and get that information.
Thank you. I've got Theo.
Turns out it's not just council tax that's unfair and unsustainable, is it? I mean, non-domestic rates have got to be pretty high up on the list of things that need to be changed. The thing that I understand we don't have any discretion really in this, but the thing that really worries me is as Councillor Smith-Roberts has referenced, the changes to the retail, hospitality and leisure sector. I'll declare an interest. I'm the chair of a community benefits society trying to buy a pub at the moment. And I really worry what the changes to relief are going to mean for a lot of our pubs and other valuable community facilities in Somerset. But it sounds like we can't do anything about it.
Sarah.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to understand that when you say you can't do anything about it, we've got to do it because the government says we've got to do it. Is that the case? Yes, okay. Yeah, well, I would like also to flag up what's going to happen to small businesses, particularly in that area, because they've also got the employers' national insurance thing to deal with as for their staff. So this is going to be a kind of double whammy, and we all hope that these small businesses will be able to keep going in the retail, hospitality and leisure industry. So that was my first point. My second point is, with regard to private schools, can you just explain the difference between those who are charities or not, or where the difference lies? I'm a bit confused. I'm sorry, I've forgotten.
Yeah, I can answer that. So some charities, some private schools run as charities, as you're aware, and some private schools are limited companies, so they're their own run business. So the rules that are coming in here are only impacting charity-based private schools. So if you are, say, a limited company and running a school as your own business, you won't be impacted by these changes.
Do you know why they've exempted them? Because I thought the charitable status thing was a bit of a legal fiction in my view, but why have they done it that way around? I don't really understand. Is that because a lot of the new schools that have been set up are not charities, but have been set up as a result of government activity?
Not with any authority. I think the way they've done it now is government have done it very specifically to bring into to enact the policy they want to introduce. as affects private schools. So they've given a definition which allows the legislation they're passing to actually work. I don't think we can speak about why the schools were set up the way they were set up in that sense.
I don't know if I can add any greater clarity, but I think the point is that the schools that aren't charities don't currently enjoy these benefits. It's removing from the ones that are. It's not making any changes to the others. That's my understanding.
Have I got any other league members or associates want to speak? Oh, I've got Mandy.
Thank you very much. Just to echo, really, certainly in my area, retail and hospitality, we've already heard many have been hit with putting rates up already. It's a double hit, but certainly when you're in a tourism area, much of the local economy actually surrounds itself around retail and hospitality. And for me, I think it will greatly impact a lot of our areas, some more than others in Somerset. My question is, do we actually sort of keep a track and keep an eye on this across the county to actually report back to anybody where it is impacting businesses and where they need to close? I'm just wondering how it will be monitored, what impacts it has, and how it affects our localities, because it's one thing bringing it in, it's quite something else that you actually measure the impacts and feed them back.
So in terms of monitoring businesses that are closing as a result of removal of relief, that isn't something that we actively monitor. I think it'd be quite difficult to, in the sense that we receive thousands of we call them cases or work items that come in from customers where they're reporting a change in circumstances. So I think it will be difficult to isolate the change in circumstances from somebody moving premises and somebody shutting down without actually fully going into every single work item that we receive. So as a process, it's not something we're actively doing at the moment, monitoring them.
I suspect there is also a piece of work in our economic development teams and in our ongoing work with chambers of trade that would pick up some of those changes, but it's not being monitored through this route, would be my suggestion.
Thank you. I suppose for me, it's sort of the health of our business and hospitality around the county, really. Who, if not us, will be monitoring? But like you said, if we're getting feedback from the Chamber of Trade, that's really helpful. I'd like to understand that a bit further. Thank you.
Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we are picking up, just in response to your comment just then, we are picking up a lot of feedback from business representative organisations, people like Chambers of Commerce, Federation of Small Businesses, about the challenges faced by, especially the smaller businesses, with the rates and reliefs and exemptions and all the other confusing aspects of the business rate system. And to be honest, I feel like the whole system isn't fit for purpose. It's rather like the council tax system. It's long overdue change, and I just wanted to make the comment that we're getting a lot of pressure from the business community about business rates and the challenges faced by smaller businesses.
Yeah, I don't think there's any disagreement or pushback on that. Thank you. Okay, not seeing any other comments or questions. Yeah, Liz.
Chair, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all the officers of the Rebs and Bens team for the whole of Somerset, for the really careful, considerate and at times robust work that they complete, because every council tax account, every business rate account is an individual account and affects people's lives differently. I really thank you for your extraordinary knowledge and your care in how you undertake your duties. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and thank you, Will and Sean, for presenting today as well. So we move to the recommendations before us, that the non-domestic rating discretionary rate relief and hardship policy is amended to prevent private schools from applying for assistance in anticipation of the changes to the Local Government Finance Act 1988. The recommended wording is to be found in Appendix D of the policy and states the ratepayer must not fall within the definition of a private school for business rates purposes. Private schools are defined by HM Treasury as schools at which full-time education is provided for pupils of compulsory school age where fees are payable. And 2, to delegate authority to the Council Section 151 officer in in consultation with the monitoring officer to make any additional amendments as necessary to ensure the wording aligns with the Act once the amendment comes into force. 3, to reduce the relief percentage within the policy for retail, hospitality and leisure sector for 25-26 from 75 to 40% as a result of changes to central government policy. And 4, to end local newspaper relief in line with central government policy. Proposed cancellations, seconded Councillor Wilkins. Those in favour, please. Those against. Okay, superb. So if we call lunchtime there and ask that we're back for 1:15?
Yeah.
1:15? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Sean.
Eight savings proposals that are deemed to be robust enough to be presented here. There are a number of additional proposals that are being worked up by officers that are not yet robust and therefore have not been presented within this report. So within the savings proposals, we have savings proposals totaling 43.95 million. So far, these are detailed in Appendix A and also within tables 3 to 6. We have presented the information in slightly different ways to enable you to see them by directorate, by savings themes and by savings type. There is also in paragraph 22 and in Appendix A, there is a £9 million saving that is being substituted. You'll recall in an earlier agenda item on the executive, I mentioned that if savings can't be delivered as previously envisaged, that they will be substituted publicly. There is a substitution for a £9 million saving here that is being substituted as part of the workforce programme that was linked to a previous reorganisation. The budget gap and where the impact of the savings and the substitutions presented here are within table 6. So in total, the new budget gap will be 53.846 million if all proposals within this report are agreed. And then that will take the gap over the medium term 5-year horizon down to 119.313 million. As I've said, there's further work going on to identify further savings so that we can close the budget gap. The budget gap that you see here indicates that we are not presenting a balanced budget for 2025-26 and that we will need to embark on further savings that will need to come forward as part of the February budget report. Within paragraph 26 and table 7, I'm also including in a small table here, you will see in a previous report on the agenda, the ongoing pressures that we're identifying within 2024-25 that could have a negative impact on the budget gap for 2025-26. Members will recall that the provision made within the medium-term financial plan is 5.9 million for any rolled forward pressures. So this is over and above that. And I would hope that we wouldn't need to use the 5.9 million. So action needs to be taken to pull these pressures back on an ongoing basis. In terms of the reserves in paragraph 27 and table 8, it's important to flag here that the general fund reserve remains at 52.374 million, while the earmark reserves are forecast to reduce by 38.667 million down to 66.209 million. This excludes dedicated schools grant and the HRA balances amongst others. And it's important to flag that in the context of the dedicated schools grant that we are forecasting a deficit that will rise to 64.199 million should we continue as currently projected. We do not have any further knowledge around the DSG statutory override officially, so we are waiting to hear government's announcements on that. There are a number of risks that are presented within paragraphs 34 onwards within the report linked to the exceptional financial support and challenges that we've had in setting the 2024-25 budget, that we are needing to take action and continue to take action to avoid a section 114 notice, given the levels of reserves that we have. and that the dedicated schools grant presents a major risk to the council. If the statutory override was not in place, we would be looking at a section 114 notice. There are other risks and issues included in paragraph 38, including some of the newer items that we are picking up. For example, tax changes such as the employers' national insurance contributions and pressures there that have increased for all employers and us as a local authority, as well as all employers out there, and the increased cost through the national living wage. I would like to continue to flag that we are seeing increases in pressures in some of our areas. Children's social care, of course, adult social care, and homelessness remain these areas that we are watching and trying to manage. It's incredibly important for us to continue to work extremely hard in balancing our budget for 25-26. It is a statutory requirement that we have a balanced budget, and we should be looking to do that in a sustainable way with ongoing savings or income to enable us to balance our budget. I'm happy to take questions.
So Wakefield, Sarah.
Yes, I just wanted to ask firstly whether the increases in national insurance and living wage have been taken into account in the council's budget, because we have to pay that as well, don't we? Don't we have to pay the national insurance thing? So is that taken into account in the figures you've already done?
So the announcements that the Chancellor made around employers' national insurance contributions were not known to us when we reset and updated the medium-term financial plan. So we haven't officially made a provision for that, but we're expecting government to fund the employers' side of the direct employees. But however, we've got no indication of that just yet. We await that in the provisional settlement. But I would hope that councils there would be funding available to us.
Okay, that's great. That would be helpful. I'd just like to flag up then, as far as adult social care and our providers are concerned, they are really worried about this. It was all the talk at the conference I was at last week about the increasing costs to them. So some of them quite small providers, the national insurance, employers' national insurance, and the living wage. And I think some of them were saying they might have to pull back from those commitments they've made or whatever. But, you know, there is a real risk here, and it will need to be reflected in the adult social care budget for next year.
So at this stage, I would say that it's not our responsibility, and we would urge all providers and establishments that are finding challenges with the national insurance contribution to be lobbying government so that everyone understands these implications. We are a council that has not set a budget in a sustainable way in the current financial year and have needed exceptional financial support and earmarked reserves and one-offs from the collection fund. So we've got just under £80 million worth of just over £80 million worth of one-offs in the current year's budget. We need to be working our way to setting a sustainable budget moving forward, and I'll be raising it with government myself that these costs are unaffordable for a local authority to pick up across all contracts, and we will seek that they compensate or rethink some of the impacts that are going to come through to local government.
Just to say, obviously, it will increase, it will result in an overspend if we don't have enough to cover this off. And I know that, as you say, we're all making these pleas to government, but if nothing comes through, we are definitely going to be almost immediately, we go into the new year, you know, in excess of our budget, because we won't be able to meet it. And we are so worried about the small providers giving up, because then we'll have to recommission in the market, probably more expensively.
I understand and I have sympathies, but I think we need to keep the pressure on government. This is a government change. This is not a change that we've made, and I continue to say that this is unaffordable for the local authority to pick up across the board for indirect employees.
Indeed, and you know, some of the biggest impacts will be in adult social care, but also in our providers, but also this reaches across the sector, not least our city, town and parish council partners who we know are precepting at the moment and don't currently know whether to precept for that national insurance rise as well for their employees. Okay, any other questions or comments from league members or associate league members? No, so I've got a hand online, and it's Councillor Sue Osborne. Good afternoon, Sue.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, Leader. Yes, it's very interesting because the impact of this is going to fall on adult social care, and up until very recently, I shadowed Sarah, and I think I do share her concerns about this. But also as well, let's not forget that a large part of our ability to deliver what we are currently delivering in adult social care also relies on the third sector, the voluntary sector, and they too are affected by this. So if the voluntary sector find themselves getting into difficulties, it won't be our responsibility anymore, because we will find ourselves undermined and no longer able to deliver to the standard or the level of what we were delivering. There could even be potential safeguarding risks that staff ratios drop, and other things as well. So it has some very serious implications, and we do need to look at how we're going to be able to solve this, because I'm not sure that we can lobby as much as we like, but if government continues to turn a deaf ear, particularly to the knock-on of those that aren't protected, we've got problems ahead. So I'm surprised in a way that hasn't been pointed out. And I'm surprised that West Streeting that Department of Health isn't aware of this, that it's going to knock on to all those voluntary providers that we do make very heavy use of in order to make our numbers add up.
Thank you, Sue. I don't think there's anyone who disagrees with your comments here. It was certainly a topic we raised with our 7 MPs last week in Parliament, and my understanding is that West Streeting and Co are very aware of the impact that this may have, and there are conversations ongoing to mitigate the impact, we are assured. Okay, so going to Francis next. Sorry, Francis. Brain paid there. Francis.
Thank you. I mean, nothing particular and specific, but just a plea when you're dealing with these questions to remember that neither vulnerable adults nor children are parcels to be moved from here to there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Diego.
Thanks, Chairman. Just noting then, I'm assuming we are on budget proposals, aren't we? Sorry, I was out of the room, just checking. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we are indeed, yes.
Obviously, noting the budget gap still for next year of £53 million. I think we've heard a kind of desired direction of travel, where this executive wants to increase the council tax above what is currently allowed. My question is, has the leader, or will he be, requesting exceptional financial support from central government for the 25-26 budget to balance the books?
I will pass on to Maria. My understanding is that that's always been the case.
If we're unable to balance the budget in a sustainable way, in order to avoid a Section 114 notice, we would need to be speaking to government about exceptional financial support. Obviously, we're still in dialogue about the 2024-25 exceptional financial support, so we stay in contact regarding this. I'm awaiting the provisional settlement just before Christmas, and I'm awaiting the outcome of the additional work that officers are undertaking in terms of the additional proposals, savings proposals that are coming forward.
Can I just rewind, because I'm conscious you perhaps put words into my mouth. The situation is that we are exploring with government what is meant by the policy announcement last week. We are very mindful of a consultation we did last year that showed that 51% of our residents would support increasing council tax to the national average in order to protect services. No decisions have been made as yet. It is an exploration as to what is and isn't allowed under that change of policy last week. So just to subtly tweak back your interpretation of the comments made earlier. I'm not seeing any other hands, so we move to recommendations. The recommendations agree the new budget savings of 25-26 are 43.950 million as set out in Appendix A. To B, agree the substitution of the 9 million saving in 25-26 as per paragraph 22. Note the revised 25-26 budget gap of 53.846 million after taking into account the proposed saving and substitution, and recommend the savings and substitution to full council, and agree the council continues with the aim of avoiding a section 114 notice by taking all of the necessary actions and continuing to operate as if one had been issued. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Lyshawn. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Wakefield. Those in favour, please. Those against? That's clearly carried. Which brings us on to agenda item 13, which is the award contracts for advocacy services. And go to Councillor Sarah Wakefield to introduce. So the main report is not needed to be under confidential session. If there is any desire, interest to discuss the confidential aspects of this report, we will need to go into private session and exclude the press and the public. Sorry. You're leaving anyway, aren't you? That's all right then. So if members could just bear that in mind as they make their comments, if they do want to go into private session, can you let me know? Because it's easier to do it after, to know before it happens, so that we can pass the resolution and evict anyone we need to. It's the supporting appendices that are confidential.
Yes, thank you. I'm pleased to introduce this new contract for advocacy. I think people probably understand that there are those in our community who are not able to advocate for themselves, and we are obliged to provide a service for those people. It's very important that it's done properly, and we have a very good provider. And I'm very delighted that this has been awarded now under going through the process fully and properly to find the provider that we're now going to hopefully endorse. And I'll hand over to our officers.
Thank you, Chair. We have a contract in place for advocacy services currently that's due to expire at the end of March next year. So as commissioners, we needed to undertake a full review of the service, revise the service specification and complete procurement exercise to ensure that we had a new contract in place for the 1st of April next year going forward. It is a statutory duty and enables those that require support to really understand information in terms of their social care and health, and be able to make decisions about how they receive their care and support. So the service does actually meet a number of statutory duties which are contained within the report. It's quite a detailed specification as well in terms of ensuring that our provider delivers against each of those statutory duties and the key legislation associated with advocacy. As part of the review, we also consulted with professionals in terms of gathering feedback in terms of how accessible the service was. Professionals both within Somerset Council and external to the organisation, and health colleagues. And we also engaged with quite a number of experts across the organisation in terms of making sure that that service specification going forward is fit for purpose and delivers the outcomes intended. And I don't know, Bernie, you want to cover some of those outcomes as part of the approach with regard to the new service?
Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for my voice. So basically, we want a seamless service. These people have been used to having an advocacy service for quite some time. The views of the service users are identified, they're voiced and they're heard. Make sure they're involved in the decisions, that people are not making decisions on behalf of these individuals. They're empowered to speak for themselves. So we've added into the specification that there's some training and learning for individuals to help them help themselves going forward. That was quite important. We did speak to people with lived experience and said that that was important to them, to give them the skill sets so that they could advocate on their own behalf going forwards. And it gives the people greater control of their own lives. So, yeah, advocacy is a good service.
Thanks, Bernie. So the recommendation made to the committee this afternoon is to endorse the process that was undertaken in terms of that procurement exercise, which was a competitive process, and a full moderation exercise was undertaken in terms of determining the successful provider against some very clear criteria. And the contract initially is for a 5-year period. Is that correct? With the option to extend for a further 3 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vicky and Bernie. Nothing else to add? So looking around for questions and comments. Nothing from leave members or associate leave members? Oh, just about to move on, Liz. Hold on.
I just want to clarify why these decisions are at executive today. I understand it's about the value of the contract and the number of years taking it over a threshold. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything from other members of council, either online or in the room? Mandy.
Yeah, just clarification on that, because I was just trying to look up schemes of delegation here to look at the figures. I think, if I'm right, some of them, the 5 years are within, the 8 years are without, but we have quite a lot of contracts that we might look at the 5 years and then a separate decision for the last 3. I'm just trying to make sure you haven't got more coming here than you need to, really, to understand that a bit more. So we're looking at total across 8 years, aren't we? But there's 5 with the potentially an additional 3. But I thought on some previous decisions, we just looked at the 5 years as opposed to the potential extra years. Is that right or wrong?
It will depend on the contract term. So quite often we'll let some contracts use X years plus an optional further years. Obviously, if we approve the contract and the governors will have to tie up who's making the decision about the additional years. So that's fairly standard now, that we'd always look to try and give ourselves a bit more space at the end of the contract if it's going well, but also so we can make sure we procure again. But it doesn't mean we have to take the additional years. There'll always be a choice for the council in there, and that's why we specify the governance. So sometimes if it's the optional, we do include it and say because of the value it generates effectively under the procurement regs. So it will depend on the individual contract whether that pushed it to here or not.
So to be very clear, if we decide to go on after that 5 years to the next 3 years, which we could do, does this key decision cover it all, or does it have to come back?
So this key decision would cover that. Depending on the decision to extend, that might need to come back to executive again, depending how we framed it in the contract documents and our governance rules at the time. But it wouldn't need to come back because of a procurement route. That's all covered in this decision.
Thank you.
Okay, so not seeing any other comments or questions, so it remains just to look back at the recommendations to endorse the procurement process, approve the contract award and recommendations outlined in the confidential Appendix B for the provision of advocacy in Somerset, to approve the commissioning of the successful bidder for an initial period of 5 years with an option to extend by 3, to provide a delegation to the executive director to agree the 3-year extension in consultation with the lead member. The decision to implement the extension or otherwise will be assessed against an agreed set of performance and service measures, and to agree the case for exempt information of Appendix B. Okay, can I see a proposer for that? Sarah Wakefield, can I see a seconder for that? Liz Lyshon, those in favour, please. Those against? Thank you, that's clearly carried. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Bernie, for your excellent report. which brings us on to item 14 on our agenda, the provision of OPMH block beds in Somerset. And can I invite Councillor Sarah Wakefield to introduce, please?
Yes, if I could make remarks about this and item 14 about block beds. I think people need to understand that provided we've assessed, and we have done very carefully in the market, what sort of level of beds we might need, it's much cheaper to have block beds available to you in certain numbers, in certain areas, than to go into the market and spot purchase. That's always more expensive. So we've got to estimate going forwards how many we're going to need and try and keep that within that cost as much as possible and keep within those numbers. It does mean occasionally you have an empty bed that you're paying for, but it's definitely more valuable than going out into the market and starting again if you have to do that. That's the first point. The second one, and this also applies to both 14 and 15, we've got a couple of places where we aren't able to make an award under the procurement process because we didn't have somebody applying or they didn't fill in the application form or something properly. So if you've done a procurement exercise and you've gone through all the process properly, you can then make a direct award without going back through the procurement exercise for that area. Just wanted to make that clear in case anybody wanted to ask a question about direct awards. But now I'd be happy to hand over to officers to explain a bit more about the contract.
Thank you, James and Gemma.
Yeah, I think you've explained the really difficult parts of that really well, actually. So what we're bringing today to ask is for approval to award 5 contracts in this space for older people's mental health beds. At present, that will be a total of 78 beds. We did have a lot out in the Taunton area where we didn't have any applications from homes. So we're also asking for your approval that we now work with our care market to explore whether there's an appetite for those beds to be awarded directly, or whether we might just hold off and see whether we wait for a bit on those ones. Contract value is stated in the paper. So at present, we're asking for 4.4 million a year. There's a further potential 600,000 with the direct award, so up to 5 million. I guess what this does as well is it picks up a little bit on the conversation that you had earlier around the national insurance and the national living wage. These beds will give us a little bit of price security in this space. So the impact of some of those increases that have been legislatively put onto us could impact the price that we pay for beds. But what this will do is give us a good cohort of beds that will be secured at a price going forwards. So it might actually end up that we haven't got enough, but I think what we've done through our exploration work is these give us enough of in the areas where we know there's this demand, and it's a good balance for us to have a mix of spot and block beds. So I think that's probably all I'll say on that one. I don't know if there's any questions.
Okay, Councillor Shearer, Heather.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. It's brilliant. It was only that when you commented that in Taunton you struggled to get something through a competitive process and quite rightly go for a direct one. That makes sense. But should we be concerned about what that's saying about the market, either generally or in Taunton? Do we have to be concerned about that going forward?
No, it's a really good question. I think we're not too concerned about the market in Taunton. Perhaps we're concerned about our potential to secure a good price going forwards. We think currently there's enough beds in Taunton. We know that there's planning approved and actually ground about to break on a new home, the Bishop's Hole development, I think it is. It's going, I forget the actual name of it. So we're not concerned longer term, but obviously we were disappointed not to get any bids. But we think there's 1 or 2 homes out there in Taunton that we can now work with to see if we can explore securing these beds.
You and Richard.
Just a question on how we track value for money on this moving forward. Do you have a mechanism so that we can, in a year's time, say actually this has saved us? Or this has cost us?
So we track every placement that we make in social care, of course. So we know the amount we're spending on we call it spot placements, so outside of these contracts to any other placement. We know the price we're paying for those. We track how full the beds are, so we'll track occupancy levels. These have always been at a really high rate of 96%, I think, Gemma, if I'm right in saying. So we know that those beds are generally full, but yes, we do track what we're paying. So I think what this does is give us that security of the future. We don't know what's going to happen. We've had some periods in social care where the prices got out of control in the last couple of years, and we've done a lot of work to bring it back in line. What this does is give us a bit of security in this space going forwards.
Seeing any other comments from league members or associate league members? So go to Mandy.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the paper. I know that this is quite a big increase, and we're expecting more people to need these beds. I think we're going from, is it 74 to 88? And at the moment, we're operating at 99.8 occupancy. So 2 questions. Firstly, have we been able to place people where we need to? Because that is just about on 100%. And secondly, if we are able to place everybody that we need to, do we actually need 88? Because that's quite a big jump. So that's my first question.
So to answer the first question, yeah, we do tend to place people in the areas where they wish to be placed. Not always the case, but we'll be as close as possible to family and friends and where people would like to be placed. So we've always used these beds well, and tended to get the right people into the right beds. The increase, one of the main reasons for the increase is the beds we've now found in Yeovil. So we hadn't previously had any block beds in Yeovil, and that is an area where we are actually really struggling a little bit with price control, with capacity in the market. So through our exploration work throughout this, we realised we needed some beds in Yeovil. So that's one of the main reasons for that increase. So we've got 10 in here for Yeovil that weren't previously a part of our block contract.
Thank you. My follow-up question actually is about the locality. So if you look at all of these, all of them are a long way from some areas of Somerset still. So, is there any provision outside of these if someone needed to be closer to their family?
Yeah, it's important to note that this is actually a real small percentage of the total beds we buy. And the areas you aren't seeing on here are because there's plenty of supply in those areas, and we're able to secure spot placements at a good price in those areas. So we've focused on areas where we know actually it helps us to have quite a number of beds in those areas to secure that price. Other areas, we don't have such a problem with that.
Thank you. That was probably a missing little bit of the report for me, that sort of context within the larger picture, possibly. And just one last question, I might need to go offline with this one possibly. With those with mental health needs and challenges, there is a point at which perhaps the NHS might come in and fund, as they perhaps deteriorate. How does that work, liaising with the NHS and their funding? How does that interact with the council?
I mean, I might ask Mel to explain the detail a bit more, but for these beds in particular, so the ones we're talking about in this, the older people's mental health nursing beds, on top of our price is what's called funded nursing care. So the NHS contribute, I think it's a £236 a week on top of that at the moment. So there is an element of health funding within these beds. And then we have continuing healthcare, and I'll let Mel.
So continuing healthcare funding.
So continuing healthcare funding is applied for. They would then fund the whole cost of those beds. People have to meet a particular criteria, and we are working with our NHS colleagues to just make sure that where we can, we are getting that fee at the right rate. So yes, they take over at a level.
Thank you.
Now, whether we leave them in our block at that level or we whip them out of our block and make them play a spot is something that we will have to negotiate with them going forward.
Thank you very much.
Briefly, Sarah, and because I've got Joe wait.
Just wanted to add about this procurement exercise and when you've been talking about places where you haven't felt it necessary, one of the things we're supposed to do in adult social care is stabilise the market. So if we know that we can get places, we don't need to block book because they might not be used or we might have too many. It's really the places where we want to make sure we can pay our prices and not, have to pay inflated prices for doing spot purchasing. So that's the whole point of it, really. So if it misses somewhere out, it's because we think we're confident we can get beds there. And it's quite important about stabilising the market so the market knows what to expect as well, because these block beds help the providers to stay afloat because they know they're going to get money. And that's really what we're doing as an adult social care department across Somerset, is trying to stabilise the market so we know what to expect and they know what to expect.
Thank you. And Joe?
Sorry, just a question. On page 466, item 7, the market forces, it says our proposal to increase the bed stock from 74 to 88, should that be 78?
No, so we've got 74 beds currently within our contracts, and within this proposal, we are increasing to 88. Yeah.
It said 78 earlier on. No, that's great. The more, the better.
I think there's an extra 10 in as well that creeps in recommendation B, I think. Not seeing.
I was just going to clarify, I think some of the confusion is because within the report, we're looking to award 78 now with the 10 additional that we'd like to work on in Taunton to direct award. So that's where we've got 78 and 88. That might be where the confusion.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So recommendation A is 78 and B is another 10, which makes 88. Yeah, that was. Indeed. Any other comments or questions? James, Gemma, thank you so much for your paper. Just run through the recommendations. The procurement of 5 contracts in care homes securing 78 OPMH block beds. Commissioners that work with the care home market to explore a direct award of 10 beds, and approving the case for exempt information in Appendix B. Can I see a proposer for that? Councillor Wakefield, seconded by Councillor Smith-Roberts. All those in favour, please. Those against, that's clearly carried. Thank you so much, James and Gemma. So we move on to item 15, which is the provision of dementia residential block beds, and Councillor Sarah Wakefield to introduce again.
I'm not sure I've got much to add, as it's a similar sort of situation, although there may be questions about the costs, which people might want to ask. So I'll hand over to the officers.
Yeah, very similar proposal to the last one, just for a different category of care bed. So this time we are asking to award into 9 contracts, block beds in homes. Lower cost, and these aren't for people that have nursing needs. These are people that have got advancing dementia, but are still at a residential level of care. We, like the last one, we had one area where we didn't have any bids, and that was in the Wellington area. And so we're asking within this to be able to do the same with these beds as we were on the previous one. Nothing really else to add on top of what was in the last paper.
Okay, thank you, James. Just looking around for any comments or questions, Liz?
Thank you. Could I just ask what confidence you have in working with providers in the Wellington area?
Yeah, we're very confident that we'll get the beds in the area, yeah, very.
Excellent. And nothing else from associate or leads, so go to Mandy.
Just a very quick question. When you're talking about 20 beds, presumably that can be across a number of providers. I'm just making sure that our smaller providers in Somerset can sort of part bid in.
Yeah, we will look at the whole of that area and any home that's suitably registered and attempt to work with them, yeah.
Okay, so again, not seeing anybody else indicating. So the recommendations are the outcome of the procurement process to award contracts The suppliers named in the reports. Appendix B for dementia residential block beds for the length of 5 years. B, commissioners to work with care home market to explore a direct award for a further 20 beds and to agree that Appendix B is exempt information. Okay, proposed Councillor Wakefield, seconded Councillor Smith-Roberts. All those in favour, please. All those against, that's clearly carried. Once again, thank you very much. Good afternoon. So we're on award contract for extra care services. Councillor Sarah Wakefield to introduce, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce this contract. We've done a full exercise, as you always have to do, but it's led to a more consultation has led to more flexible framework, and we've been actually able to reduce some costs, which I'm sure my officers will explain in a moment. So it's really important to have this sort of extra care is where you've got people who need some support, but they're living independently, probably in little flatlets, with some care in the property. And it's an absolute way forward for a lot of people who've got special needs and who need a bit of support, but can live independently. And that's the way we want to go. We want as many of our citizens and residents to live as independently as possible. And extra care housing has a really important role in this. This is long-term care for people who are going to have lifetime needs. Thank you.
Welcome, Stephen and Sally.
Thank you. So in terms of extra care housing, as Councillor Wakefield said, it does sit in a spectrum. So from general needs housing, where people might receive domiciliary care in their own home, through to residential care, and extra care housing overlaps the bottom end of residential care. And what we're trying to do with this recommission is be able to support people in extra care housing for longer, in order to reduce the likelihood of those people requiring a residential care placement, which will likely be an additional cost over extra care housing. As Councillor Wakefield said, we've done a full procurement process, and in advance of that, we've consulted with residents, we've consulted with landlords, we've consulted with internal and external staff around redesigning service specifications, and then we've done a two-stage procurement process. What we're proposing to award is contracts across 3 different lots, and those are outlined in Appendix B. And as Councillor Wakefield has said, every single hourly rate as part of those tenders has reduced, some by large amounts, some by fairly small amounts, but every reduction is welcome. And I think that sums it up for me.
Sorry, I may have brought this up before. It's just very noticeable when I look at the list of locations that they are. There's a gap. Is where I live, and anywhere particularly near to where I live or to where one could get to. So I represent Wells, but that's the whole of the West Mendip area seems to be a bit of a gap. And is there anything we can do to sort of address that going forwards?
So these contracts are for the care and support going into extra care housing schemes. At the moment, there's only one extra care housing scheme in the East area, and I think over the lifetime of these contracts, we will need to look at the long-term suitability of some of the existing schemes and whether we need additional capacity in different areas of the county. So I think the way we've designed these contracts is we can add and subtract schemes from them, and that would be the approach we would want to take going forwards, as we have some schemes reach the end of their operational lives and other schemes where we identify that we need that capacity.
Thank you. Duncan.
Yeah, and just to add, that's also conversations that I know Mallock's starting with housing providers, not about the care and support that we contract through this mechanism, but actually the original grant funding and what we need to look, because we need a different pattern of development across the county area for exactly the reasons you're outlining, but that's not this contractual position. That's about where we put the housing grant we've got, the other funding we can make available, and talk to Homes England or whatever they're currently called. Have I got the name right just for once? And just make sure that we've actually got that pipeline being built. So right now we don't have a pipeline that's clear enough about what we need to see in terms of future housing need and where it's going, but that's what we need to get developed.
And it may not be immediately relevant to this discussion, but I like to shoehorn it in where I can.
Thank you. Anything from any other members? Not saying anything, which means we move on to our recommendation. Oh, no. No, that's okay. So move on to our recommendations to avoid the following contracts for care and support commencing on the 1st of April 25 for a period of 5 years with options extended up to a further 2 years in those 3 lots to equalise the charge for the core support and all schemes at a rate of £29.27 from the 1st of April, removing the rate of £59.04 that is currently being paid by residents of those schemes where housing-related support is currently commissioned from care providers but will be directly provided by social landlords under the new model, and to initiate a consultation with ECH residents on a proposal to review the charges paid by the residents of ECH schemes annually as part of the annual adult social care fees and charges process. And I assume we're noting that that appendix is confidential as well. Do I have a proposer? That Councillor Wakefield, seconded Councillor Wilkins. Those in favour, please. Those against, that's clearly carried. And thank you, Sally and Stephen, for all your hard work on this. And we have a key decision to enter into a lease for a commercial investment property. Item 17, and Councillor Mike Rigby to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. We seem to be making far too much in the way of good time today, so I'm intending to string this out for a good couple of hours if everyone's happy with that.
We're looking forward to this now.
We've got a nice little unit down in Christchurch. We found a tenant for it. Got some. The terms have been agreed. The heads of terms have been agreed. I think the key issue with this one is that the letting will increase the value as well as providing us with some money for as long as we own it. We'll get a decent income out of it, but it does also have the effect of increasing the capital value by having a tenant paying a decent rent on it. It ensures that the tenant is there for the next 5 years, possibly 10, and the tenant is expecting to invest significant sums in the unit itself. So all in all, good news. I hope you will agree that we can proceed with the lease. We have Brendan here in the event that anyone has any questions which are beyond me. Thank you.
I can't believe that any questions would be like beyond you, Mike, but let's find out. Any comments or questions? Just again to note the confidential potential issue here. Sarah?
Yeah, just to say I'm delighted that this property is being relet. I think it was going to be quite hard to let actually at one time, and they've done a fantastic job. I have to say the team have done a fantastic job in identifying a tenant and getting it to this stage. So I'm absolutely in favour of this, and I think that means the property's worth more to us, the better. Thank you.
Okay, and to Mandy?
Thank you. I appreciate it's confidential appendix. I have got a question, but for expediency, I'll take it offline if I may and drop you an email. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing anybody else asking to speak. No, in which case we go to the recommendation. The recommendations to authorise the recommendation appendix 1 regarding a lease on the terms so identified, and noting the case for confidential appendix 1, and delegates authority to make all necessary arrangements to the executive director and lead member. Okay, those. Oh, I haven't got a proposer and second. I propose Councillor Rigby, seconded Councillor Wilkins. Those in favour, those against. That is clearly carried. And that. Okay, I think that concludes all our agenda business for today. Just to note that the next executive meeting is on the Wednesday, the 15th of January 2020, and it says 2024 in my notes. So so unless we got a time machine, I'm going to suggest that's 2025. And also to note, I think that's a change of the advertised date because I think it was this. No, it was earlier in the month. Correct. So if you haven't picked that up, don't turn up a week early or 2 weeks early, please, because you'll be disappointed. Thank you so much for everyone for your attendance, and thank you officers for your support with the meeting. Declare the meeting closed.